On a bone-chilling night in February 1809, in the shadowed heart of Cedar Mills, Ohio, 3 boys came into this world under a veil of secrecy so thick it could choke the truth from the air itself. Their birth wasn't heralded by church bells or warm hearths. It happened in the damp, hidden basement of a Quaker meeting house, a place where the cries of the oppressed mingled with the whispers of rebellion. This wasn't just a birth. It was an event that ripped through the fabric of what we're told is possible. A moment that the powers of this world have fought to erase from memory. You, sitting there, scrolling through the endless noise of your screen, have been led to this story for a reason. I'm not here to entertain you with ghost stories or fairy tales. I'm here to pull you down a rabbit hole so deep it'll make your soul tremble. What happened in Cedar Mills wasn't just a footnote in some dusty archive, it was a crack in the foundation of the systems that control you. Systems that have been lying to you since before you were born. Those 3 boys, born in the flickering light of a single candle, weren't ordinary. They were something else, something that terrified the men and women who built their empires on secrets and chains. Let me take you back to that frozen night, to a time when America was a raw, bleeding wound, its promises of freedom mocked by the clank of shackles. Cedar Mills was no more than a speck on the map, a cluster of 200 souls clinging to survival in southeastern Ohio, where the wind carried the howls of bloodhounds and the fear of betrayal. The Quakers who called this place home weren't your Sunday sermon types. They were radicals, heretics in the eyes of the law, running Station 12 on the Underground Railroad. Their meeting house, a plain brick building, was a fortress of defiance, its basement a sanctuary carved from earth and desperation, where men and women fleeing slavery hid from the hunters who dragged them back to hell. This was a world where truth was a death sentence, where every knock on the door could mean the end of everything. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, a man whose eyes burned with the weight of secrets he'd never confess, were playing a game of life and death. They weren't just hiding people, they were defying a system built on ancient corruption, a system that stretched back centuries to the first ships that brought stolen lives to these shores. That system wasn't just about chains and plantations, it was about control, about owning not just bodies but minds, about rewriting reality so the oppressed would never question their place. And into this crucible of rebellion and fear came Miriam, a young woman heavy with child, her arrival like a spark in a powder keg. She wasn't just another fugitive. She carried a presence that made even the stoic Quakers pause, a quiet power that seemed to see through the lies they told themselves to survive. Miriam knew things she shouldn't have known. She'd warn of approaching strangers before their footsteps echoed, point out tainted food before it could poison, and call out falsehoods with a calm that cut deeper than any blade. This wasn't intuition. It was something older, something forbidden, a knowledge that the institutions of this world have spent lifetimes trying to bury. You see, the truth about humanity isn't what they teach you in schools or preach from pulpits. It's not about progress or civilization. It's about power, about who gets to decide what's real and what's forbidden. Miriam's gift, whatever it was, threatened that power. She was a glitch in their carefully constructed machine, a woman who could see the strings that puppet masters used to control the masses. And on that night, February 23rd, 1809, as slave catchers prowled the frozen hills led by the Baxter brothers, men whose names were synonymous with cruelty, she went into labor in that hidden basement. The air was thick with fear, the kind that claws at your throat, the kind that makes you question every choice you've ever made. Above, the world was a storm of betrayal and violence. Below, in the flickering dark, 3 boys were born in silence, their first breaths a defiance of the chaos that sought to destroy them. Elijah, Levi, and Noah, their names would echo through time, not as heroes but as harbingers, as proof that humanity's potential is far greater and far more dangerous than we've been allowed to believe. Their mother, Miriam, didn't survive the night. Her last words, whispered in a language that sounded like water over ancient stones, were a warning. They'll see what others cannot. Guard them, for they are not like us. Those words weren't just a mother's plea. They were a prophecy, a crack in the wall of lies that institutions have built to keep us blind. You need to understand this. The world you live in today, with its screens and systems and endless distractions, is no accident. It's a cage designed to keep you from asking questions, from seeing the truths that people like Miriam and her sons carried in their blood. The powers that rule us, governments, corporations, churches, have always known there are those who can see through their illusions. They've known since the days of ancient empires when priests and kings burned seers at the stake, not for witchcraft, but for the crime of knowing too much. The triplets' birth was no random event. It was a moment when the universe itself seemed to rebel against the chains of control. Those boys, born in a basement that smelled of earth and fear, were a threat to every institution that thrives on deception. Their existence was a reminder that humanity isn't just a collection of obedient workers or docile believers. We're something more, something capable of breaking free from the psychological chains that bind us. But freedom like that comes at a cost. The Quakers who took those boys in, who vowed to raise them as their own, didn't just take on 3 orphans. They took on a burden that would test the limits of their faith and their courage. They were hiding children who could see the truth in a world built on lies, children who could sense the rot beneath the surface of every promise, every law, every sermon. And the slave catchers, those enforcers of a corrupt system, weren't just hunting runaways. They were hunting anyone who dared to challenge the order that kept the powerful in power. The Baxter brothers, with their bloodhounds and their bounties, were the foot soldiers of a machine that's been running for centuries, a machine that crushes anyone who dares to see beyond the veil. You might think this is just a story from a forgotten time, a tale of a small town and a strange birth, but you'd be wrong. This is about you, about the world you're living in right now. The systems that controlled Cedar Mills in 1809 haven't gone away. They've just gotten smarter, slicker, more invisible. They've traded shackles for algorithms, whips for propaganda, but the goal is the same: to keep you from knowing who you really are, from tapping into the potential that people like Miriam and her sons represent. The triplets weren't just born with gifts. They were born with the ability to expose the hidden agendas that govern us all. Their story has been buried, not because it's unbelievable, but because it's dangerous. It's a story that proves the human mind can transcend the limits we've been taught to accept, that we can sense the lies we're fed, that we can break free from the psychological control systems that keep us docile. But to do that, you have to be willing to look at the world differently, to question everything you've been told, to feel the weight of truths that have been suppressed. Said for generations, I'm telling you this because you're ready to hear it, because you're one of the few who can handle the knowledge that the world isn't what it seems. The triplets' birth was a spark, a signal that humanity's potential is far greater than the powers that be want you to believe. But sparks can be snuffed out, and the forces that hunted those boys in 1809 are still out there, watching, waiting, ready to silence anyone who gets too close to the truth. So as we dive deeper into this story, I want you to ask yourself, are you ready to see what they saw? Are you ready to face the forbidden history that's been hidden from you, to confront the ancient corruption that still shapes our world? Because once you start down this path, there's no going back. The truth about Cedar Mills, about those 3 boys, about what they became, it's not just a story. It's a call to wake up, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. Let's go deeper, together, and uncover what they didn't want you to know. Picture a place so remote, so forgotten, that even the wind seems to carry secrets too heavy for the world to bear. A tiny Quaker hamlet called Cedar Mills, tucked away in the rugged hills of southeastern Ohio in 1809, home to barely 200 souls who lived on the razor's edge between hope and annihilation. This wasn't a town of bustling markets or grand churches. It was a scattering of weathered cabins, a lone general store, and a blacksmith's forge, all huddled around a modest brick meeting house that stood like a silent sentinel against the darkness. But don't let its simplicity fool you. Cedar Mills was a battleground, a place where the whispers of freedom clashed with the snarls of oppression, where every shadow hid a threat and every dawn brought the promise of betrayal. You, sitting there, staring at your screen, have been conditioned to believe the world is orderly, that history is a neat timeline of progress and heroes. I'm here to shatter that illusion, to drag you into a reality where the truth was a weapon, and those who wield it were hunted like animals. Cedar Mills wasn't just a dot on a map. It was a crucible where the human spirit was tested, where the lies of empires and the chains of ancient corruption were challenged by a handful of defiant souls. The Quakers who lived here weren't the meek, pious figures you might imagine. They were rebels. outcasts who dared to believe that every human soul was equal, a belief so dangerous it could get them hanged. Their meeting house wasn't just a place of worship, it was a fortress of resistance, a hub of the Underground Railroad where men and women fleeing slavery found refuge in a world that wanted them crushed. Beneath that unassuming building lay a basement, carved from the earth with bleeding hands and desperate hearts, a hidden sanctuary where the oppressed could breathe, if only for a night, before facing the gauntlet of slave catchers and bloodhounds. This was a time when the United States was a lie dressed up in liberty's clothes, a nation built on stolen lives and enforced silence. The powers that ruled, politicians, landowners, and the shadowy forces behind them, didn't just want control over bodies. They wanted dominion over minds, over truth itself. They crafted a system so insidious it convinced people their suffering was divine will, their chains a natural order. Cedar Mills stood in defiance of that system, but defiance came at a cost. Every creak of a floorboard, every stranger's glance, every dog's bark in the distance could mean the end. The fugitive slave laws, precursors to the even harsher decrees of later years, gave bounty hunters like the Baxter brothers free rein to terrorize Ohio's borderlands, their greed and cruelty cloaked in legal authority. These weren't just men. They were enforcers of a psychological control system that stretched back to the dawn of empires, a system designed to break spirits and bury truths. The Quakers knew this, and they fought back not with swords but with secrecy, with courage, with a belief that truth could outlast tyranny. But truth is a dangerous thing, my friend, and in Cedar Mills it was about to become something far more potent and far more perilous than anyone could have imagined. The people of this hamlet lived in a constant state of vigilance, their lives a delicate dance between hope and dread. They knew the stories of those who'd been caught, dragged back to plantations where whips and branding irons waited. They knew the names of neighbors who'd vanished after asking too many questions, speaking too loudly, or trusting the wrong person. This was a world where trust was a luxury, where every word could be a trap, where the institutions that preached justice were the same ones profiting from oppression. The meeting house, with its plain walls and wooden benches, was more than a building. It was a symbol of resistance against a world that thrived on deception. Its basement, ventilated by hollow fence posts disguised as ornaments, was a marvel of survival, a testament to what humans can achieve when they refuse to bow. But even here, in this sanctuary of defiance, the air was thick with fear, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question whether freedom is worth the price. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, a man whose calloused hands and piercing eyes told of a life spent defying the odds, were no strangers to sacrifice. Josiah had seen friends imprisoned, families torn apart, lives extinguished, all for the crime of believing in a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. He knew the stakes weren't just about saving lives, they were about preserving the spark of human potential, the ability to see beyond the lies we're fed. But even Josiah couldn't have foreseen what was coming, what the birth of those three boys would unleash. The triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, weren't just children. They were a breach in the wall of control, a living challenge to the systems too, had keep us blind. Their mother, Miriam, had arrived in Cedar Mills days before, her swollen belly and uncanny perception marking her as something extraordinary. She didn't just carry life. She carried a truth so potent it could unravel the carefully woven tapestry of institutional power. The powers that be, those faceless architects of control who've manipulated humanity for centuries, have always feared people like Miriam, people who can see the invisible chains, who can sense the hidden agendas lurking behind every law and sermon. In 1809, those agendas were raw and unpolished, but no less ruthless. The slave trade wasn't just a business, it was a machine of psychological domination designed to erase identity, to convince the enslaved that their suffering was eternal, unchangeable. Cedar Mills was a direct threat to that machine, and Miriam's arrival was a warning shot. Her ability to know things no one should know, hinted at a power that could expose the corruption at the heart of the system. And when her sons were born in that basement under the threat of discovery, they inherited something far greater than her blood. They inherited her sight, her defiance, her refusal to be controlled. You need to understand this because it's not just about a small town in 1809, it's about the world you're living in right now. The systems that ruled Cedar Mills haven't vanished. They've evolved. They've traded bounty hunters for algorithms, prisons for debt, but their goal remains the same: to keep you from seeing the truth, from realizing that you're more than a cog in their machine. The Quakers of Cedar Mills were fighting a war most people didn't even know existed, a war against a corruption so ancient it predates the written word. That corruption thrives on our ignorance, on our willingness to accept the stories we're told without questioning. But in Cedar Mills, sometimes Hing was stirring, a spark of awareness, a glimpse of what humanity could be if it dared to break free. Those 3 boys, born in the shadow of oppression, were more than a miracle. They were a warning to the powers that be, a sign that their control wasn't absolute. As we move deeper into this story, I want you to feel the weight of what was at stake in that hamlet, to sense the courage it took to stand against a world built on lies. Cedar Mills wasn't just a place. It was a rebellion, a crack in the foundation of a system that's been manipulating us for millennia. And the triplets, they were the key to something bigger, something that could either save us or destroy us. So hold on tight, because we're about to uncover truths that have been buried for too long, truths that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the world and your place in it. Stand with me now in the biting cold of February 1809 before a humble brick building in Cedar Mills, Ohio, a Quaker meeting house so plain it could be mistaken for a barn, yet within its walls lies a secret so profound it could tear apart the very lies that hold our world together. This wasn't a cathedral adorned with gold or a fortress bristling with cannons. It was a simple structure, its red bricks weathered by wind and rain, its narrow windows like eyes that saw too much but spoke too little. To the passing eye, it was nothing more than a place where quiet folk gathered to pray. But you, my friend, are about to learn what they didn't want you to know. This meeting house was a vault of forbidden truths, a stronghold against the ancient corruption that's been strangling humanity since the first kings claimed divine right. Its unassuming exterior was a mask, a deliberate deception to hide the fire of rebellion burning within, a fire that threatened to expose the psychological control systems that keep us all in chains. Step inside with me, feel the creak of the wooden floorboards beneath your feet, smell the faint must of old hymnals and candle wax, and sense the weight of secrets that cling to the air like smoke. This was no ordinary place of worship. It was Station 12 on the Underground Railroad, a nerve center in a war against the institutional manipulation that justified slavery and silenced dissent. Beneath those floorboards, hidden by a trapdoor so cunningly crafted it could fool the devil himself, was a basement, a dark earthen chamber where men and women fleeing bondage found a fleeting taste of freedom. That basement wasn't just a hiding place, it was a defiance of everything the powers of this world stood for, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be crushed by the weight of lies. You've been taught to see history as a parade of dates and names, but I'm here to show you the truth. History is a battlefield, and places like this meeting house were its front lines. The Quakers who built it, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, weren't just praying for salvation. They were waging a war against a system that's been manipulating humanity for millennia, a system that thrives on our ignorance, our fear, our willingness to accept the chains we're given. The meeting house was their weapon, its simplicity a shield against suspicion, its secret basement a dagger aimed at the heart of oppression. Every beam in that ceiling, every hollow fence post that funneled air to the hidden chamber below was a calculated act of resistance against a world that demanded obedience. But resistance comes with a price, and in 1809, that price was paid in blood and silence. The fugitive slave laws gave men like the Baxter brothers, mercenaries cloaked in legal righteousness, free rein to hunt, to terrorize, to drag souls back to a hell crafted by men who claimed to speak for God. These hunters weren't just after runaways, they were enforcers of a psychological prison, a system designed to make the oppressed believe their suffering was inevitable, their freedom a sin. The meeting house stood as a direct challenge to that prison, but it was more than a sanctuary. It was a crucible where truths too dangerous to speak were born. The triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, came into this world in that basement, their silent birth a scream against the lies that bound their mother, Miriam, and millions like her. Miriam's arrival days before, her uncanny ability to see through deception, was a warning to the Quakers that something greater was at play. She wasn't just a fugitive, she was a bearer of forbidden knowledge, a woman whose gifts could expose the hidden agendas that propped up the slave trade and the empires behind it. The meeting house, with its plain benches and bare walls, became the stage for a revelation that could unravel human understanding, not of God, but of ourselves, of what we're capable of when we break free from the chains of control. You need to see this clearly. The world you live in today, with its endless distractions and carefully curated narratives, is a descendant of the world that feared this meeting house. The institutions that rule us, governments, corporations, religions, have always known there are places like Cedar Mills, places where the truth can't be contained. They've burned libraries, silenced prophets, and buried evidence to keep us from knowing what those triplets represented. A glimpse of humanity's true potential, a power to see through the illusions that keep us docile. The meeting house was a beacon of that power, but it was also a target. Every night, as the Quakers barred the door and prayed for safety, they knew the Baxter brothers were out there, their bloodhounds sniffing for any trace of defiance. The tension in Cedar Mills was a living thing, a pulse that beat beneath the surface of every conversation, every glance. The meeting house wasn't just a building, it was a promise that the truth could survive, even in a world built on lies. But truths like that don't come cheap. The Quakers who maintained Station 12 were risking everything, not just their lives but their souls, their faith in a world that could be better. They knew the stories of conductors caught and tortured, of families betrayed by neighbors who sold secrets for a handful of coins. They knew the ancient corruption that fueled this system, the same corruption that built pyramids on the backs of slaves and crowned kings with stolen gold. That corruption wasn't just about power. It was about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy was fixed, eternal, ordained. The meeting house was a rebellion against that lie, a place where the human spirit could breathe free, if only for a moment. And when Miriam's sons were born in that basement, under the threat of discovery, they brought with them a truth so explosive it could shatter the foundations of that control. The triplets weren't just children, they were a breach in the system, a living proof that humanity could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. Their birth in that meeting house wasn't an accident, it was a moment when the universe itself seemed to push back against the darkness. But the powers that be don't take kindly to such moments. They've spent centuries perfecting their methods, fear, division, distraction, to keep us from seeing what the Quakers saw, what Miriam knew, what those boys would become. The meeting house, with its secret basement and its defiant spirit, was a threat they couldn't ignore. As we go deeper into this story, I want you to hold on to the image of that simple brick building, standing alone in the Ohio wilderness, a symbol of what's possible when we dare to question, to resist, to see. The triplets' story began here, but it's your story too, because the same forces that hunted them, are still out there, still watching, still trying to keep you from the truth. This meeting house wasn't just a place, it was a call to wake up, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. Let's keep going, down this path where the shadows are deep and the truths are dangerous, because what happened in Cedar Mills is only the beginning. Beneath the unassuming floorboards of the Cedar Mills meeting house, in the frozen heart of February 1809, lies a secret so dangerous it could topple the empires of lies that have chained humanity for centuries. A covert basement, known only as Station 12 on the Underground Railroad, a sanctuary carved from dirt and defiance for those escaping the iron grip of slavery. You, sitting there, drowning in the noise of a world that feeds you half-truths and distractions, need to hear this. This basement wasn't just a hiding place. It was a rebellion against a system designed to crush the human soul, a system that's been perfected over millennia to keep you blind, obedient, and ignorant of your own power. The Quakers of Cedar Mills, those quiet radicals who dared to call this place home, weren't just hiding fugitives. They were waging a war against an ancient corruption that thrives on stolen lives and silenced voices. This basement, dug by trembling hands under the cover of night, was more than a shelter. It was a middle finger to the institutions that claimed ownership over human beings, a declaration that truth could outlast tyranny. Picture it. A cramped earthen chamber, its walls damp with the sweat of fear, lit only by the flicker of smuggled candles, where men, women and children huddled, their breaths shallow, their eyes wide with the hope of freedom and the dread of capture. This was Station 12, a linchpin in a network that stretched across Ohio's wilderness, a lifeline for those who dared to defy the chains that bound them. But don't be fooled into thinking this was just about saving lives. It was about dismantling a psychological control system so insidious it convinced millions that their suffering was God's will. Thus, at their freedom was a crime. The powers that ruled in 1809, planters, politicians, and the shadow figures pulling their strings, didn't just want bodies. They wanted minds, hearts, souls, all bent to the will of a machine that's been running since the first empires rose on the backs of the enslaved. The Underground Railroad was a crack in that machine, and Station 12 was its beating heart, a place where the truth couldn't be buried, no matter how many bloodhounds the Baxter brothers unleashed. Those hunters, with their bounties and their brutality, were more than mercenaries. They were the enforcers of a world order that feared nothing more than people who could see through its lies. You need to understand this because the world you live in today is built on the same foundation. The screens you stare at, the laws you follow, the stories you're told, they're all part of a system designed to keep you from questioning, from realizing that you're more than a pawn in their game. The basement of Station 12 was a testament to what happens when people refuse to play that game, when they risk everything to protect a truth that the powerful would kill to suppress. Every inch of that hidden chamber was a rebellion, its ventilation shafts disguised as fence posts, its trapdoor concealed beneath a speaker's platform, a masterpiece of desperate ingenuity. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, knew the stakes. Every night they barred the meeting house door. They were gambling with their lives, their families, their faith. They knew the stories of conductors tortured for their defiance, of entire communities burned for harboring runaways. They knew the ancient corruption that fueled this system, the same corruption that built palaces on the bones of the poor, that wrote laws to protect the powerful and silence the weak. But they also knew something the Baxters and their masters did. The human spirit is stronger than any chain, and the truth, once glimpsed, cannot be unlearned. That basement was where the triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, were born, in the shadow of a war most people didn't even know was being fought. Their mother, Miriam, wasn't just a fugitive. She was a beacon of forbidden knowledge, a woman whose ability to see through deception threatened the very foundations of the system that hunted her. Her sons, born in that damp, flickering sanctuary, inherited more than her blood. They inherited her power, a power that could unravel the psychological control systems that keep us all in line. You see, the world doesn't just want your obedience. It wants your ignorance, your willingness to accept the lies that keep the powerful in power. The Underground Railroad was a threat to that ignorance, and Station 12 was its boldest expression, a place where the oppressed could dream of a world where truth mattered more than power. But dreams like that are dangerous, my friend, and the men who ran this world in 1809 knew it. They sent their hunters, their spies, their laws to crush places like Cedar Mills to ensure that no one could challenge their dominion. The Baxter brothers weren't just after runaways. They were after the idea of freedom itself, the idea that people could see beyond the lies they were fed. The basement of Station 12 was a direct challenge to that idea, a place where the truth lived, even if only for a night. When Miriam went into labor on February 23, 1809, as the threat of discovery loomed above, that basement became more than a hiding place. It became a birthplace of something new, something that could change the course of human history. The triplets' silent arrival, their uncanny stillness as slave catchers prowled overhead, was a sign that the world was about to shift, that the systems of control were not as invincible as they seemed. You need to feel the weight of this, because it's not just a story from a forgotten time. It's a warning about the world you're living in now. The institutions that hunted the Quakers and their charges are still here, wearing new masks but playing the same game. They've traded whips for algorithms, prisons for debt, but their goal remains: to keep you from seeing the truth, from realizing that you carry the same potential as those triplets, the same ability to break free from their chains. The basement of Station 12 was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there are places where the truth can survive, where the human spirit can defy the odds. But survival isn't enough. You have to fight for it, you have to protect it, you have to be willing to risk everything to keep it alive. The Quakers knew this, and they paid the price in fear, in loss, in lives. They knew the ancient corruption that drove the slave trade, the same corruption that drives the systems controlling you today, corporations that profit from your data, governments that profit from your fear, religions that profit from your guilt. The triplets, born in that basement, were a threat to that corruption, a living proof that humanity could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. Their story, buried for centuries, is a call to wake up, to see the world for what it is, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. As we dive deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to the image of that hidden basement, its walls echoing with the whispers of those who dared to dream of freedom. Station 12 wasn't just a place, it was a promise, a spark of rebellion that could ignite a fire the powerful can't extinguish. Let's keep going, down this path where the truths are dangerous and the stakes are higher than you've ever imagined. In the frostbitten shadows of February 1809, the borders of Ohio pulse with a tension so raw it could cut through bone, a land where slave catchers prowl like wolves, empowered by laws that choke the fragile network of freedom fighters daring to defy an empire of lies. You, sitting there, lulled by the sanitized stories of a world that claims to value liberty, need to wake up to the truth. In Cedar Mills, Ohio, the air was thick with dread. Every heartbeat a gamble against a system that's been rigging the game since the dawn of time. The fugitive slave laws of 1793, precursors to even crueler decrees, gave men like the Baxter brothers, vipers cloaked in legal authority, free rein to hunt human beings as if they were prey, to tear apart families and crush the spark of hope that dared to flicker in the hearts of the enslaved. This wasn't just about capturing runaways, it was about enforcing a psychological stranglehold, a system designed to make the oppressed believe their chains were eternal, their dreams of freedom a sin against the natural order. The Underground Railroad, that fragile web of courage and secrecy, was a direct assault on that system, and Cedar Mills, with its hidden basement at Station 12, was one of its beating hearts. But don't be fooled into thinking this was a noble, tidy rebellion. These were desperate people fighting a war they weren't supposed to win, against forces that have been manipulating humanity for centuries. The Baxters, with their bloodhounds and their bounties, weren't just men. They were the enforcers of an ancient corruption, a machine that thrives on fear, division, and the erasure of truth. You need to feel this in your bones, because the world you live in today is built on the same foundation, different masks, same game. The laws that empowered slave catchers in 1809 weren't just about slavery, they were about control, about ensuring that no one dared to question the hierarchy that kept the powerful in power. The Quakers of Cedar Mills, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, knew this, and they chose to stand in the path of that machine, knowing full well that one misstep could bring it crashing down on them. Every night, as they barred the meeting house door, they lived with the knowledge that a traitor could be among them, that a neighbor could sell their secrets for a handful of coins, that the Baxters could storm in with guns and dogs, sanctioned by a government that preached freedom while profiting from chains. This was a world where trust was a death sentence, where every stranger's face could hide a betrayer, where the very laws of the land were weapons in the hands of those who ruled. The Underground Railroad wasn't just a network of safe houses, it was a rebellion against a psychological control system that convinced millions their suffering was divine, their resistance futile. And in Cedar Mills, that rebellion was more than a fight for freedom. It was a fight for the truth, a truth that the powers of this world have been burying since the first empires rose on the backs of the enslaved. The Baxters weren't just hunting people, they were hunting ideas. The idea that every soul is equal, the idea that no one should live in chains, the idea that humanity could be more than a tool for the powerful. You have to see this clearly, because the systems that armed those slave catchers are still here, still working to keep you ignorant of your own power. They've traded bounties for surveillance, laws for algorithms, but their goal remains to keep you from questioning, from seeing the hidden agendas that shape your life. In 1809, those agendas were raw and brutal, written in blood and enforced by violence, but they were no less sophisticated. The institutions that backed the slave trade, governments, church, its merchants, weren't just profiting from human suffering. They were crafting a narrative that made it seem inevitable, righteous, eternal. The Underground Railroad was a crack in that narrative, and Station 12 was one of its sharpest edges, a place where men like Josiah Whitmore and women like Miriam dared to say no, to risk everything for a truth that could set the world on fire. When Miriam arrived in Cedar Mills, her uncanny ability to see through lies was a direct threat to that narrative, a glimpse of a power that could unravel the psychological chains binding millions. And when her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, were born in that hidden basement as the Baxter's hounds bayed in the distance, they became something more than children. They were a warning, a sign that the human spirit could break free from the systems designed to crush it. Those triplets, born in the flickering light of a single candle, carried a gift that could expose the ancient corruption at the heart of the world, a corruption that's been manipulating humanity since the first kings claimed their thrones by divine right. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, were just pawns in that corruption, foot soldiers in a war to keep the truth buried. You need to understand this because it's not just about a forgotten town in 1809. It's about the world you're living in now, a world where the same forces are at work, keeping you distracted, divided, docile. The Underground Railroad was a rebellion against that control, and Cedar Mills was one of its strongholds, a place where the truth could breathe, even if only for a moment. But moments like that are dangerous, my friend, because they remind us that we're more than what we're told we are, that we can see beyond the lies, that we can fight back. The triplets' birth in that basement wasn't just a miracle. It was a challenge to every institution that thrives on our ignorance, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful couldn't extinguish. The tension in Cedar Mills was more than fear of capture. It was the tension of a world on the brink, a world where the truth was starting to slip through the cracks. Josiah Whitmore and his Quakers knew this, and they lived every day with the weight of that knowledge, knowing that their defiance could cost them everything. The Baxters, with their laws and their bloodhounds, were the enforcers of a system that feared nothing more than people who could see, who could know, who could resist. As we dive deeper into this story, I want you to hold on to that tension, to feel the pulse of a town that dared to stand against a world built on lies. The triplets, born in that moment of peril, were more than a sign. They were a call to arms, a reminder that the truth is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Let's keep going, down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than steel, because what happened in Cedar Mills is a warning for us all. Imagine a darkness so deep it swallows hope, a damp earthen chamber beneath the Cedar Mills meeting house in February 1809, hand-carved by lantern light, its sturdy beams propping up a fragile dream of freedom, a basement that wasn't just a hiding place but a defiant monument to human ingenuity, a middle finger to the ancient corruption that chains us all. You, sitting there, numbed by a world that feeds you lies to keep you compliant, need to see this place for what it was. Station 12 on the Underground Railroad, a sanctuary crafted with bleeding hands and unyielding hearts, where the air flowed through hollow fence posts disguised as ornaments, a secret so clever it mocked the slave catchers prowling above. This basement, dug inch by agonizing inch under the flicker of smuggled candles, was more than a refuge. It was a rebellion against a psychological control system that's been crushing souls since the first empires learned to wield fear as a weapon. The Quakers of Cedar Mills, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, didn't just build a hiding spot. They built a fortress against a world that thrives on deception, a world that wants you to believe your place is fixed, your potential limited, your freedom a fantasy. Every beam in that basement, hewn from oak and set with trembling precision, was a testament to desperate ingenuity, a refusal to bow to the institutional manipulation that justified slavery and silenced truth. The ventilation system, those hollow posts that looked like mere decoration, was a stroke of genius born from necessity, carrying whispers of fresh air to those hiding below while the Baxters and their bloodhounds sniffed for any sign of defiance. You need to feel the weight of this, because this wasn't just about saving lives. It was about preserving the spark of human potential, the ability to see through the lies that keep us shackled. The basement stretch, nearly the length of the meeting house, its walls scarred with the marks of shovels and prayers, a space where men, women and children huddled in silence, their breaths held as boots stomped overhead. This was a place where hope and fear collided, where the truth couldn't be buried no matter how many laws the powerful wrote to crush it. The fugitive slave laws of 1793 gave monsters like the Baxter brothers the right to hunt human beings, to tear families apart, to enforce a system that wasn't just about chains but about breaking minds, convincing the oppressed that their suffering was eternal. The basement of Station 12 was a direct challenge to that system, a proof that ingenuity could outwit tyranny, that the human spirit could carve out a space for freedom in the heart of oppression. But don't think this was a fairy tale of noble heroes. These were people pushed to the edge, risking everything for a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. The Quakers knew the stories of conductors caught and tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. They knew the ancient corruption that fueled this system, the same corruption that built palaces on the bones of the poor, that wrote scriptures to justify kings and chains. That corruption wasn't just about power, it was about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy was ordained, that resistance was futile. The basement, with its crude beams and hidden vents, was a rebellion against that lie, a place where the truth could breathe, even if only for a night. When Miriam arrived in Cedar Mills, her uncanny ability to see through deception made her a living threat to that corruption, a woman who could sense the hidden agendas that propped up the slave trade. And when her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, were born in that basement on February 23, 1809, as the Baxters closed in, and the chamber became more than a hiding place. It became a birthplace of something extraordinary, something that could unravel the psychological chains binding humanity. Those triplets, born in silence as danger loomed above, weren't just children. They were a breach in the system, a proof that humanity could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. You have to understand this because the world you live in today is a direct descendant of the world that feared this basement. The institutions that hunted the Quakers and their charges are still here, using surveillance instead of bloodhounds, propaganda instead of whips, but their goal is the same: to keep you from seeing the truth, from realizing that you carry the same potential as those triplets. The basement's design wasn't just about survival, it was about defiance, about showing the world that the human spirit could outsmart the systems designed to crush it. Every hollow post, every carefully placed beam was a message to the Baxters and their masters: you can't control us all. But defiance like that comes at a cost, and the Quakers paid it in fear, in loss, in lives. They knew the Baxters could come at any moment, knew a traitor could betray them, knew the laws were stacked against them, yet they kept digging, kept hiding, kept fighting, because they believed in a truth worth dying for. The triplets' birth in that basement wasn't just a miracle, it was a warning, a sign that the truth could no longer be contained. Those boys, with their mother's gift to see through lies, were a threat to every institution that thrives on deception, from the slave traders of 1809 to the corporations and governments of today. You need to see this clearly because the systems that feared Station 12 are still watching, still working to keep you ignorant of your own power. They've buried the stories of places like Cedar Mills, not because they're unimportant, but because they're dangerous. Dangerous enough to inspire, to awaken, to change everything. The basement, with its desperate ingenuity, was a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity can find a way to resist, to carve out a space for truth in a world built on lies. As we go deeper into this story, I want you to hold on to the image of that hand-carved chamber, its beams standing strong against the weight of oppression, its hidden vents whispering freedom to those who dared to dream. Station 12 wasn't just a basement, it was a battlefield, a place where the truth fought back against a system that's been manipulating us for millennia. The triplets, born in that sacred space, were a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful couldn't extinguish. Let's keep moving, down this path where the truths are sharp and the stakes are higher than you've ever imagined, because the story of Cedar Mills is a call to wake up to see what they didn't want you to know. In the frozen shadows of Cedar Mills, Ohio, in February 1809, every heartbeat in the hidden basement of Station 12 carried the weight of life and death, where one wrong move, a creaking floorboard, a stifled cough, a whispered prayer could mean capture, imprisonment, or a fate far worse for the freedom seekers huddled beneath the Quaker meeting house. You, sitting there, lulled by a world that masks its cruelty with shiny distractions, need to grasp the raw, gut-wrenching stakes of this moment, because this isn't just a story from a distant past. It's a window into the machinery of control that's been grinding down humanity for centuries, a machinery that's still at work today, keeping you blind to the truth of your own power. The basement, that hand-carved sanctuary of Station 12, wasn't just a hiding place. It was a fragile thread in a tapestry of rebellion, a direct challenge to a system that thrives on fear, deception, and the erasure of hope. The freedom seekers, men, women, children, their bodies scarred from whips, their eyes burning with a desperate dream of liberty, knew that every second in that damp, candlelit chamber was a gamble against a world that wanted them broken. The Baxters, those slave catchers who roamed Ohio's borders like predators, weren't just men. They were the sharp edge of an ancient corruption, a system that's been chaining minds as much as bodies since the first tyrants learned to rule through terror. The fugitive slave laws of 1793 gave them the power to hunt with impunity, to drag souls back to plantations where torture and death waited, all under the guise of law and order. You need to feel this in your core, because the stakes in Cedar Mills weren't just about survival. They were about defying a psychological control system that convinced millions their suffering was divine, their resistance a crime against nature. The Quakers, led by Eldin, Josiah Whitmore, lived with this truth every day, their hearts pounding as they barred the meeting house door, knowing that one slip, a misplaced trust, a careless glance, a traitor's whisper, could bring the Baxters crashing in, tearing apart everything they'd built. This was a war, not just for the lives of those hiding below, but for the very idea that humanity could be free, that we could see through the lies that keep us shackled. The basement was a fortress, but it was a fragile one, its beams and hidden vents a testament to desperate ingenuity, but no match for the guns and dogs of men who served a system that feared nothing more than truth. Every night, as the wind howled through Cedar Mills, the Quakers and their charges lived on a knife's edge, knowing that the Baxters could be minutes away, that a neighbor could sell them out for a bounty, that the laws of the land were written to protect the powerful and punish the brave. This wasn't just about slavery, it was about a world order that's been manipulating humanity for millennia, convincing us that our place is to obey, to accept, to never question the hidden agendas that shape our lives. You're living in that world right now, my friend, where the Baxters have been replaced by algorithms and surveillance, but the stakes are the same. One wrong move, one moment of defiance, and the system will try to crush you. The freedom seekers in that basement weren't just running from chains, they were running from a lie that said they were less than human, a lie that the institutions of 1809, governments, churches, merchants, upheld with every ounce of their power. Those institutions weren't just profiting from slavery, they were profiting from ignorance, from the belief that the truth could be buried, that people could be made to forget their own strength. But Station 12 was proof that the truth couldn't be buried, not completely. Every soul who hid in that basement, every Quaker who risked their life to protect them, was a rebellion against that lie, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful couldn't extinguish. When Miriam arrived in Cedar Mills, her uncanny ability to see through deception was a direct threat to that system, a glimpse of a power that could unravel the psychological chains binding millions. And when her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, were born in that basement on February the 23rd, 1809, as the Baxters' hounds bayed in the distance, the stakes became even higher. Those triplets weren't just children, they were a fissure in the foundation of control, a living proof that humanity could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. Their birth, in that moment of peril, was a warning to the Baxters and their masters that the truth was slipping through their grasp, that the human spirit could not be contained forever. You need to see this clearly, because the world you're in today is built on the same principles that made Station 12 a target. The systems that hunted those freedom seekers are still here, using new tools to keep you compliant, to keep you from asking questions, from realizing that you carry the same potential as those triplets. The stakes in Cedar Mills were life and death, but they were also about something bigger, about whether humanity could break free from the ancient corruption that's been manipulating us since the first empires rose. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, were just pawns in that corruption, foot soldiers in a war to keep the truth buried. The Quakers knew this, and they paid the price in fear, in loss, in the constant threat of betrayal. They knew the stories of conductors tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. But they also knew that the truth was worth it, that the freedom seekers hiding beneath low were more than fugitives. They were bearers of a truth that could change the world. The triplets' birth in that basement wasn't just a miracle, it was a rebellion, a sign that the system's control wasn't absolute. Those boys, with their mother's gift to see through lies, were a threat to every institution that thrives on deception, from the slave traders of 1809 to the corporations and governments of today. You need to carry this with you, because the stakes haven't changed. The world still wants you ignorant, still wants you to believe that defiance is futile, that the truth is too dangerous to pursue. But Station 12, with its hidden basement and its desperate stakes, is a reminder that the truth can survive, even in the darkest times, if there are those willing to fight for it. The triplets, born in that moment of terror, were a spark that could set the world ablaze, a proof that humanity's potential is greater than the chains we're given. As we dive deeper into this story, I want you to hold on to the stakes of that night, to feel the fear and the hope that pulsed in that basement, to understand that the fight for freedom is a fight for truth. Let's keep going down this path where the shadows are deep and the truths are sharper than any blade, because the story of Cedar Mills is a call to wake up, to see what they've been hiding from you all along. In the biting chill of February 1809, a young woman named Miriam steps into the flickering light of Cedar Mills, Ohio, a pregnant fugitive whose serene demeanor and uncanny foresight send a shiver through the stoic Quakers, a shiver that echoes with the weight of truths too dangerous for the world to know. You, sitting there, caught in the web of a system that feeds you lies to keep you tame, need to meet this woman, because Miriam wasn't just a runaway. She was a living fracture in the machinery of control, a bearer of forbidden knowledge that could unravel the ancient corruption that's been chaining humanity since the first empires rose. Her arrival at the Quaker meeting house, Station 12 on the Underground Railroad, wasn't just a moment of refuge. It was a spark that threatened to ignite a fire the powerful have spent centuries trying to snuff out. Miriam, barely 19, carried herself with a calm that seemed to defy the chaos of her circumstances. Her swollen belly, a testament to life persisting in the face of death, her dark eyes piercing through the veils of deception that cloaked the world around her. She wasn't loud or boastful, but her presence was a quiet storm, unsettling even the Quakers who'd seen their share of hardship and defiance. They were used to fear, to the trembling hands and haunted gazes of those fleeing slavery's horrors. But Miriam was different. She saw things, knew things, things that no one should know. She could sense a stranger's approach before their boots touched the snow, could point to a basket of bread and declare it tainted before anyone tasted it, could look into a man's eyes and call out his lies with a certainty that cut like a blade. This wasn't intuition. It was something older, something primal, something the institutions that rule us, then and now, fear more than anything else. You need to understand this, because Miriam's FT was a direct threat to the psychological control systems that keep us all in line, systems that have been perfected over millennia to make us believe our place is to obey, our dreams are to be forgotten. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, saw in her a power that could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade, the same agendas that fuel the corporations and governments of your world today. In 1809, the Baxters, those slave catchers who prowled Ohio's borders, weren't just hunting bodies. They were hunting anyone who dared to see through the lies that justified their cruelty. Miriam was a danger to them, not because of her pregnancy, but because of her ability to see the truth, to sense the rot beneath the surface of a world built on exploitation. The fugitive slave laws gave men like the Baxters the power to act as enforcers of an ancient corruption, a corruption that's been manipulating humanity since the first kings claimed divine right, since the first priests convinced the masses their suffering was holy. Miriam's foresight, her ability to know what was coming, was a crack in that corruption, a glimpse of what humanity could be if it broke free from the chains of control. When she arrived at Station 12 just days before February 23, 1809, the Quakers sensed they were in the presence of something extraordinary, something that could change everything. Her calm wasn't the calm of surrender, it was the calm of someone who saw the world for what it was and refused to bow to its lies. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried a weight that made even Josiah pause, his steady gaze faltering under the intensity of hers. She'd warn of approaching danger, not with panic but with a quiet certainty, as if she could hear the thoughts of the Baxters miles away. She'd refuse food that seemed fresh, only for it to spoil hours later. She'd call out, a visitor's false name exposing a traitor before he could betray. This wasn't magic, it was a power that the systems of 1809 and the systems of today have fought to suppress, because it threatens their very existence. You're living in a world that's been shaped by that suppression, a world where the truth is buried under layers of distraction and propaganda, where people like Miriam are silenced, not because they're wrong, but because they're right. The meeting house, with its hidden basement, was a sanctuary for people like her, a place where the truth could survive, even if only for a night. But survival wasn't enough. Miriam's arrival was a sign that the truth was fighting back, that the human spirit could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. When she went into labor on that fateful night, as the Baxters closed in, the stakes became clear. Her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, would inherit her gift, a gift that could expose the psychological chains binding millions, a gift that could unravel the institutional manipulation that keeps us all in check. You need to feel this, because Miriam wasn't just a woman, she was a warning, a reminder that the truth is a weapon, and those who wield it are hunted. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, were just pawns in a larger game, a game played by institutions that fear nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. The Quakers, who took Miriam in, knew they were risking everything, not just their lives but their souls, by protecting someone who could see through the lies that held the world together. They knew the stories of conductors tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. But they also knew that Miriam's gift, and the gift she would pass to her sons, was worth it. Those triplets, born in that basement as danger loomed above, were more than children. They were a breach in the system, a proof that humanity could transcend the limits imposed by those who rule. You're part of that system, my friend, whether you know it or not. The world you live in, with its endless screens and curated narratives, is designed to keep you from seeing what Miriam saw, from knowing what she knew. The ancient corruption that hunted her is still here, using new tools to keep you ignorant, to make you believe that defiance is futile, that the truth is too dangerous to pursue. But Miriam's story, and the story of her sons, is a call to wake up, to see through the lies, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. The meeting house, with its hidden basement and its defiant Quakers, was a battleground, a place where the truth fought back against a world that wanted it buried. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to Miriam's image, her serene face, her piercing eyes, her refusal to bow to a world that wanted her broken. She was a spark in the darkness, a sign that the truth can survive even in the face of overwhelming odds. Let's keep moving down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because Miriam's story is just the beginning of what they didn't want you to know. In the flickering gloom of Cedar Mills, Ohio, in February 1809, Miriam, a young fugitive with eyes that seem to see beyond the veil of this world, wields gifts so strange and potent they could shatter the lies that chain humanity to an ancient corruption, a power to predict visitors' arrivals before their shadows cross the threshold, to detect tainted food before it poisons, to speak truths that cut through deception like a blade through fog. You, sitting there, trapped in a world that blinds you with noise and distraction, need to understand what Miriam represented, because her abilities weren't just uncanny, they were a direct assault on the psychological control systems that have kept us shackled for millennia, systems that thrive on our ignorance, our fear, our willingness to swallow the lies we're fed. When Miriam stepped into the Quaker meeting house, Station 12 on the Underground Railroad, her serene presence was a storm wrapped in silence, unsettling even the battle-hardened Quakers who'd seen the worst of humanity's cruelty. She wasn't loud or defiant, but her quiet certainty was a weapon, one that could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade and the empires behind it. Picture her, barely 19, heavy with child, standing in the dim light of that hidden basement, her gaze locking onto a man claiming to be a friend, only to declare, with a voice soft as a whisper but sharp as steel, that his name was a lie, his intentions a betrayal. Days later, when that man was revealed as a spy for the Baxters, the slave catchers who hunted with bloodhounds and bounties, the Quakers knew they were in the presence of something extraordinary, something that threatened the very foundations of the world they fought against. Miriam's gifts weren't tricks or guesses. She'd pause mid-conversation, her head tilting as if hearing a distant sound, and warn of strangers, approaching long before their boots crunched the snow. She'd push away a bowl of stew, claiming it was spoiled, only for it to turn rancid hours later, saving the Quakers from sickness. She'd look into the eyes of a visitor and call out their falsehoods, not with anger, but with a calm that made their lies crumble like ash. This wasn't intuition, it was a power that reached back to something primal, something the institutions of 1809 and the institutions of today have spent lifetimes trying to suppress. You need to see this clearly because Miriam's abilities were a crack in the system, a glimpse of what humanity could be if it broke free from the psychological chains that bind us. The Baxters, those enforcers of a brutal order, weren't just hunting runaways. They were hunting anyone who could see through the lies that justified their power, lies that convinced millions their suffering was ordained, their freedom a sin. The fugitive slave laws of 1793 gave them the right to tear lives apart, but Miriam's gifts were a direct challenge to that right, a proof that the truth could not be contained, no matter how many laws they wrote or dogs they unleashed. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, saw in her a spark that could set the world ablaze, a woman who could sense the hidden agendas that propped up the slave trade, agendas that stretch back to the first empires that built their wealth on stolen lives. Those agendas weren't just about profit, they were about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy was fixed, that their pain was God's will. Miriam's foresight, her ability to pierce through deception, was a threat to that control, a reminder that the human mind could transcend the limits imposed by those who rule. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the descendants of those agendas use algorithms and propaganda to keep you blind, to make you believe your potential is limited, your questions dangerous. But Miriam was living proof that the truth could fight back, that the human spirit could see beyond the illusions crafted to keep us docile. When she arrived at Station 12, just days before February 23, 1809, the Quakers knew they were harboring more than a fugitive. They were harboring a force that could unravel the psychological control systems that held the world together. Her gifts weren't just about survival. They were about defiance, about showing the world that the truth could not be buried forever. Every warning she gave, every lie she exposed, was a blow against the ancient corruption that's been manipulating humanity since the first kings claimed divine right, since the first priests convinced the masses their suffering was holy. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, were just pawns in that corruption, foot soldiers in a war to keep the truth hidden. But Miriam's presence in that basement, her calm voice cutting through the chaos, was a sign that the war wasn't over, that the human spirit could still resist. When her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, were born in that hidden chamber as the Baxters closed in, her gifts became their inheritance, a power that could expose the lies that bind us, a power that could change the course of human history. You need to feel this, because Miriam wasn't just a woman, she was a warning, a beacon of what we could be if we dared to see the truth. The Quakers, who risked everything to protect her, knew they were standing on the edge of something bigger, something that could threaten every institution that thrives on deception. They knew the stories of conductors tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. But they also knew that Miriam's gifts, and the gifts she would pass to her sons, were worth it. Those triplets, born in silence as danger loomed above, were more than children. They were demons. A breach in the system, a proof that humanity could evolve beyond the chains imposed by those who rule. You're part of that system, whether you like it or not, living in a world where the truth is buried under layers of distraction, where the descendants of the Baxters use new tools to keep you ignorant, to make you believe that defiance is futile. But Miriam's story is a call to wake up, to see through the lies, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. The meeting house, with its hidden basement and its defiant Quakers, was a battleground, a place where the truth fought back against a world that wanted it dead. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to Miriam's gifts, her ability to see, to know, to speak truths that pierce through deception. She was a spark in the darkness, a reminder that the truth can survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Let's keep moving down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because Miriam's story is just the beginning of what they didn't want you to know. In the frozen hush of Cedar Mills, Ohio, in February 1809, a chilling moment unfolds in the dim glow of the Quaker meeting house, where Miriam, the young fugitive with eyes that pierce the soul, exposes a traveler's hidden motives, declaring his name a lie before his betrayal is confirmed days later. A moment that sends a shiver through the air and reveals a truth so dangerous it could dismantle the ancient corruption that's been chaining humanity for centuries. You, sitting there, numbed by a world that buries truth under layers of deception, need to hear this story, because it's not just about a woman in a forgotten town. It's about a power that threatens the psychological control systems that keep you blind, that keep you obedient, that keep you from seeing the hidden agendas shaping your life. Picture the scene. A weary traveler, cloaked in the guise of a friend, steps into the meeting house, his face lined with the dust of Ohio's roads, his words dripping with promises of aid for the Underground Railroad. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, are cautious but hopeful, their hearts hardened by years of betrayal, yet still clinging to the dream of trust. But Miriam, heavy with child and radiating a calm that feels like a storm held in check, fixes her gaze on the man and speaks, her voice soft but unyielding. "Your name isn't Thomas. You're here to betray us." The room freezes, the air thick with dread, as the man's smile falters, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. She doesn't raise her voice, doesn't flinch, but her words cut through his facade like a blade through silk, exposing a truth that no one else could see. Days later, word reaches Cedar Mills that this man, who called himself Thomas, was a spy for the Baxter brothers, the slave catchers who prowl Ohio's borders with bloodhounds and bounties, ready to sell out Station 12 for a handful of silver. Thus, it wasn't just a moment of intuition, it was a glimpse of a power that could unravel the lies that hold the world together, a power that the institutions of 1809 and the institutions of today fear more than anything else. You need to feel the weight of this, because Miriam's ability to see through deception wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon, a direct challenge to a system that thrives on lies, that convinces millions their suffering is deserved, their freedom a fantasy. The Baxters weren't just hunting runaways, they were hunting anyone who could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade, agendas that stretch back to the first empires that built their wealth on stolen lives. Those agendas were about more than profit. They were about control, about crafting a psychological prison that makes the oppressed believe their chains are eternal, their resistance futile. Miriam's gift, her ability to sense a traitor's heart before he could act, was a crack in that prison, a proof that the truth could not be buried forever. The Quakers, who'd seen their share of spies and sellouts, were shaken by her words, their stoic resolve crumbling under the weight of her certainty. Josiah Whitmore, whose calloused hands and steady gaze had guided countless souls to freedom, felt the ground shift beneath him, sensing that Miriam was more than a fugitive. She was a harbinger of something the world wasn't ready to face. Her ability to call out a false name, to see the rot beneath a friendly smile, was a threat to every institution that thrives on deception, from the slave traders who profited from misery to the governments and churches that sanctified it. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the descendants of those institutions use propaganda, surveillance, and distraction to keep you from seeing what Miriam saw, from knowing what she knew. The traveler's betrayer. L confirmed days later when a Quaker scout overheard him plotting with the Baxters was a warning that the system would stop at nothing to protect its lies. On the night of February the 23rd, 1809, in the bone-chilling darkness of Cedar Mills, Ohio, a frantic signal, 3 sharp raps followed by a pause, cuts through the silence of the Quaker meeting house, a warning that the ruthless Baxter brothers, slave catchers whose names are whispered like a curse, are closing in, their bloodhounds baying for the scent of freedom seekers hiding in the basement of Station 12. You, sitting there, numbed by a world that cloaks its cruelty in laws and lies, need to feel the pulse of this moment, because it's not just a snapshot from a forgotten time. It's a glimpse into the machinery of control that's been grinding down the human spirit for centuries, a machinery that's still at work today, keeping you blind to the truth that could set you free. The air in Cedar Mills is thick with dread, every creak of the meeting house floorboards a potential death sentence, every shadow a threat that could unravel the fragile network of the Underground Railroad. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, have lived with this fear for years, their hearts hardened by the stories of conductors tortured, safe houses burned, and entire communities punished for daring to defy a system that thrives on ancient corruption. But this night is different. This night the stakes are higher than ever, because Miriam, the young fugitive with gifts that pierce through deception, is in that basement, her labor pains beginning as the Baxters draw near. The signal at the door, delivered by a breathless scout who risked everything to outrun the hunters, sends a jolt through the Quakers, their hands trembling as they bar the door and whisper prayers that feel more like pleas to a world that's turned its back on them. The Baxters aren't just men, they're the sharp edge of a psychological control system that's been manipulating humanity since the first empires learned to rule through. Fear, a system that uses laws like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 to justify tearing families apart, to convince the oppressed that their suffering is eternal, their resistance futile. You need to see this clearly because the world you live in now is built on the same foundation, using algorithms and propaganda to keep you ignorant of your own power, to make you believe that defiance is a crime. The meeting house, with its hidden basement and its defiant Quakers, is a battleground, a place where the truth fights to survive against a system that wants it dead. The Baxters, with their guns, their dogs and their greed, are more than slave catchers. They're enforcers of a hidden agenda, a world order that fears nothing more than people who can see through its lies. Miriam's presence in that basement, her ability to sense deception, to predict danger, to expose traitors, is a direct threat to that order, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful can't extinguish. As the signal echoes through the meeting house, Josiah Whitmore's steady gaze falters, his calloused hands tightening around the edge of a pew, knowing that the lives of 6 freedom seekers, including Miriam, hang in the balance. The basement below, with its sturdy beams and hollow fence posts, is a marvel of ingenuity, but it's no match for the violence of men who serve a system that profits from human misery. The Quakers know the stories, families dragged back to plantations, conductors beaten to death, entire communities punished for daring to harbor runaways. They know the ancient corruption that fuels this system, the same corruption that built empires on the bones of the enslaved, that wrote scriptures to justify kings and chains. That corruption isn't just about power. It's about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy is fixed, that their pain is God's will. But Miriam, lying, in that basement, her breaths shallow as labor begins, is a living defiance of that control, a woman whose gifts could unravel the lies that hold the world together. The triplets she's about to bring into the world, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, will inherit her power, a power that could expose the psychological chains binding millions, a power that could change the course of human history. You need to feel the suspense of this moment, because it's not just about a night in 1809, it's about a war that's still being fought, a war for the truth, for the right to see, to know, to resist. The Baxters, closing in with their dogs and their bounties, are just pawns in that war, foot soldiers for an institutional manipulation that's been shaping humanity for millennia. The Quakers, standing guard above that basement, know that one wrong move could mean the end, not just for the freedom seekers, but for the idea they represent, the idea that humanity can be more than a tool for the powerful. The signal at the door is a warning that the system is coming, that the truth is under attack, that the spark of rebellion in Cedar Mills could be snuffed out before it has a chance to spread. You're part of that system, my friend, whether you know it or not, living in a world where the descendants of the Baxters use new tools to keep you compliant, to bury the stories of people like Miriam because they're dangerous, because they remind us that we can see through the lies, that we can fight back. The suspense of that night, as the Quakers brace for the worst, is a reminder that the truth is worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. The basement, with its hidden vents and trembling occupants, is a testament to what humanity can achieve when it refuses to bow, when it dares to defy a world that wants it broken. When Miriam's sons are born in that moment of peril, as the Baxters' hounds howl closer, they become more than children. They become a breach in the system, a proof that the truth can survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. You need to carry this with you, because the stakes in Cedar Mills are the same stakes you face today, a choice between ignorance and awakening, between submission and resistance. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, were just the visible face of a system that fears nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to the suspense of that frantic signal, the moment when the truth hung by a thread, when the Quakers stood ready to fight for a spark that could change everything. Let's keep moving, down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because the story of Cedar Mills is a call to wake up, to see what they've been hiding from you all along. In the heart of a frozen night on February 23, 1809, in Cedar Mills, Ohio, the air inside the Quaker meeting house crackles with an urgency that could choke the breath from your lungs as Elder Josiah Whitmore faces an impossible choice. Evacuate 6 freedom seekers from the hidden basement of Station 12, including Miriam, the young fugitive whose labor has begun, as the Baxter brothers' bloodhounds howl closer, their guns gleaming with the promise of death. You, sitting there, dulled by a world that buries truth under layers of distraction, need to feel the pulse-pounding stakes of this moment, because this isn't just a desperate scramble in a forgotten town. It's a clash with a system of ancient corruption that's been crushing the human spirit for millennia, a system that's still at work today, keeping you blind to the power you could wield if you dared to see. The meeting house, that unassuming brick fortress, is a battlefield now, its hidden basement a fragile sanctuary where 6 souls, men, women, 1 child, and Miriam, racked with the pains of childbirth, huddle in silence, their lives hanging on Josiah's next move. The frantic signal at the door, 3 sharp raps delivered by a scout who outran the Baxters' dogs, has set the Quakers' hearts racing, their hands trembling as they realize the truth. One wrong decision, one moment of hesitation could mean capture, torture, or worse for those below. The fugitive slave laws of 1793 have armed the Baxters with the power to hunt without mercy, to drag human beings back to plantations where whips and branding irons wait, all in the name of a system that's not just about slavery but about control, about convincing the oppressed that their suffering is eternal, their resistance a sin. You need to grasp this, because the urgency in that meeting house isn't just about saving lives, it's about defying a psychological control system that's been manipulating humanity since the first empires learned to rule through fear, a system that uses laws, lies, and violence to keep us ignorant of our own potential. Josiah Whitmore, his calloused hands gripping the edge of a pew, his steady gaze clouded with dread, knows the weight of this moment. He's guided countless souls through the Underground Railroad, but this night is different. Miriam, with her uncanny ability to see through deception, is in labor, her breaths sharp and labored in the damp basement, her presence a beacon of forbidden knowledge that threatens the very foundations of the world that hunts her. The Baxters aren't just after runaways, they're after anyone who can expose the hidden agendas that prop up their power, agendas that stretch back to the first kings who claimed divine right, the first priests who convinced the masses their pain was holy. Miriam's gift, her ability to sense danger and pierce lies, is a crack in that power, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful can't extinguish. But now, as her labor intensifies, Josiah faces a crisis that tests the limits of his courage. He must move 6 people, including a woman giving birth, through a network of tunnels and safe houses before the Baxters break through the meeting house door. The basement, with its sturdy beams and hidden vents, is a marvel of ingenuity, but it's no match for the violence of men who serve a system that profits from human misery. You need to feel this urgency, because it's not just about a night in 1809, it's about a war that's still being fought, a war for the truth, for the right to see, to know, to resist. The Quakers, their faces pale in the candlelight, know the stories of conductors caught and tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. They know the ancient corruption that fuels this system, the same corruption that built empires on the bones of the enslaved, that wrote laws to protect the powerful and silence the weak. That corruption isn't just about power, it's about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy is fixed, that their dreams of freedom are a fantasy. But Miriam, lying in that basement, her body racked with pain, yet her eyes burning with a calm defiance, is a living rebuttal to that lie, a woman whose gifts could unravel the psychological chains binding millions. Her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, about to be born in this moment of peril, will inherit her power, a power that could expose the lies that hold the world together, a power that could change the course of human history. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the descendants of the Baxters use surveillance and propaganda to keep you compliant, to bury the stories of people like Miriam because they're dangerous, because they remind us that we can see through the lies, that we can fight back. The urgency of that night, as Josiah scrambles to plan an escape, is a reminder that the truth is worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. The freedom seekers in that basement aren't just running from chains, they're running from a system that wants them broken, that wants them to believe they're less than human. Josiah knows that moving them is a risk, that the tunnels leading from the basement are narrow and treacherous, that Miriam's labor could slow them down, that the Baxters could be waiting at the other end. But he also knows that staying still is certain death, that the truth Miriam carries and the truth her sons will inherit is too important to let die. The Quakers, their hands shaking as they prepare to lift the trap door, are fighting for more than lives. They're fighting for a spark of human potential, a spark that could set the world ablaze. You need to carry this with you, because the stakes in Cedar Mills are the same stakes you face today. A choice between ignorance and awakening, between submission and resistance. The Baxters, with their guns and their greed, are just the visible face of a system that fears nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. As Miriam's labor pains echo in the basement, as Josiah weighs the impossible choice of fight or flight, the meeting house becomes a crucible, a place where the truth fights to survive against a world that wants it dead. The triplets, about to be born in this moment of desperation, are more than children. They're a breach in the system, a proof that the truth can survive even in the face of overwhelming odds. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to the urgency of that night, the moment when everything hung in the balance, when Josiah and his Quakers stood ready to risk everything for a truth that could change everything. Let's keep moving down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because the story of Cedar Mills is a call to wake up, to see what they've been hiding from you all along. In the suffocating darkness of the Cedar Mills meeting house basement on February 23, 1809, as the Baxter brothers' bloodhounds howl closer and the threat of capture looms like a noose, Miriam, the young fugitive whose gifts pierce the veil of lies, lies still in the throes of labor, her eerie calm a beacon of defiance that seems guided by an unseen force, a power that could shatter the ancient corruption chaining humanity to a world of deception. You, sitting there, lulled by a reality that buries truth under layers of noise, need to feel the weight of this moment, because Miriam's stillness isn't just a mother enduring childbirth. It's a rebellion against a psychological control system that's been manipulating us for millennia, a system that thrives on fear, ignorance, and the erasure of our potential. The basement of Station 12, with its damp walls and flickering candlelight, is a crucible of desperation, where 6 freedom seekers huddle in silence, their breaths held as the Quakers above scramble to evade the Baxters' wrath. Yet Miriam, lying on a makeshift pallet of straw and blankets, her body racked with the pains of labor, remains unnaturally composed, her dark eyes steady, her breaths even, as if she's not just enduring but commanding the moment, guided by a force that transcends the chaos around her. This isn't the panic of a woman facing death, it's the calm of someone who sees beyond the lies that hold the world together, someone who knows truths that the institutions of 1809 and the institutions of today fear more than anything else. You need to see this clearly because Miriam's eerie calm is a crack in the system, a proof that the human spirit can rise above the fear and control that the powerful use to keep us docile. The Baxters, with their guns and their dogs, are enforcers of a system that's been running since the first empires learned to chain mind, as well as bodies, a system that uses laws like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 to justify tearing lives apart, to convince the oppressed that their suffering is eternal, their resistance futile. But Miriam, in that basement, is a living rebuttal to that lie, her stillness a defiance of the chaos that surrounds her, her foresight a weapon that could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade and the empires behind it. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, watch in awe and unease as she lies there, her face serene despite the pain, her eyes fixed on some unseen horizon, as if she's communing with a truth that the world has been taught to forget. They've seen courage before, but this is something else, something that makes their hands tremble as they prepare to move the freedom seekers, something that makes them question the limits of what it means to be human. Miriam's gifts, her ability to predict danger, to detect poison, to pierce through deception, are already legendary in Cedar Mills, but this moment, as she lies still in labor, is a revelation. It's as if she's tapped into a force older than the empires that hunt her, a force that the institutions of this world, governments, churches, merchants, have spent centuries trying to suppress. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the descendants of those institutions use propaganda, surveillance, and distraction to keep you from seeing what Miriam saw, from knowing what she knew. Her calm isn't just a quirk, it's a signal that the truth can survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds, even as the Baxters' boots thud closer, their dogs snarling for blood. The basement, with its sturdy beams and hidden vents, is a marvel of ingenuity, but it's no match for the violence of men who serve a system that profits from human misery. Yet Miriam, lying there, seems untouched by the fear that grips the others, her stillness a defiance of the psychological chains that bind us all. The Quakers, who've risked everything to protect her, know they're witnessing something extraordinary, something that could change the course of history. They know the stories of conductors tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. They know the ancient corruption that fuels this system, the same corruption that built palaces on the bones of the enslaved, that wrote scriptures to justify kings and chains. That corruption isn't just about power, it's about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy is fixed, that their pain is God's will. But Miriam's eerie calm, as she lies in that basement, is a direct challenge to that control, a proof that the human spirit can transcend the fear and lies that keep us shackled. Her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, about to be born in this moment of peril, will inherit her power, a power that could unravel the psychological chains binding millions, a power that could expose the lies that hold the world together. You need to feel this because Miriam's stillness is a call to wake up, to see through the lies, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. The Baxters, closing in with their dogs and their bounties, are just pawns in a larger game. A game played by institutions that fear nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. The Quakers, standing guard above, know that the stakes are higher than ever. Miriam's labor, her calm, her gifts, are a threat to every institution that thrives on deception, from the slave traders of 1809 to the corporations and governments of today. As Josiah weighs the impossible choice of evacuation, as the freedom seekers brace for a desperate escape, Miriam's calm becomes a beacon, a reminder that the truth can fight back, even in the darkest moments. Her sons, about to enter the world, are more than children. They're a breach in the system, a proof that humanity can evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. You're part of that system, whether you know it or not. Living in a world where the truth is buried under layers of distraction, where the descendants of the Baxters use new tools to keep you compliant, to make you believe that defiance is futile. But Miriam's eerie calm as she lies in that basement is a reminder that the truth is stronger than fear, that the human spirit can rise above the chaos of a world that wants it broken. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to the image of Miriam, lying still in that dim basement, guided by an unseen force, defying the odds with a calm that shakes the foundations of control. She was a spark in the darkness, a sign that the truth can survive, even when the world is closing in. Let's keep moving down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because Miriam's story and the story of her sons is a call to wake up, to see what they've been hiding from you all along. In the suffocating gloom of the Cedar Mills meeting house basement, on that frozen night of February 23rd, 1809, as the Baxter brothers' bloodhounds snarl closer and the air grows heavy with the dread of betrayal, three boys, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, slip into the world in a silence so absolute it feels like a rebellion against the chaos threatening to consume them, their open eyes burning with an unnatural clarity, their steady breathing a rhythm that defies the terror above. You, sitting there, dulled by a world that buries truth under endless layers of noise, need to grasp the weight of this moment, because this wasn't just a birth. It was a fracture in the machinery of control that's been chaining humanity for millennia, a spark that could set fire to the lies that hold empires together. These boys, born in the flicker of a single candle's flame, weren't ordinary infants, fragile and crying, groping blindly at life. No, their eyes were wide open from the moment they drew breath, their gazes sharp as knives, as if they could already see through the veils of deception woven into the fabric of the world above. Their breathing, steady and synchronized, wasn't the labored gasps of newborns, but the calm pulse of souls who knew their place, who carried a power that could unravel the psychological control systems that keep us all in chains. This was no ordinary moment. It was a direct assault on the ancient corruption that's been manipulating humanity since the first tyrants claimed divine right, since the first priests convinced the masses their suffering was holy. The basement of Station 12, with its damp earthen walls and sturdy beams, was more than a hiding place. It was a crucible where the human spirit defied the chains of oppression, where the truth fought to breathe against a system that wanted it dead. Miriam, their mother, lay on a crude pallet of straw and blankets, Haas. Her body racked with the pains of labor, yet her face serene, her dark eyes fixed on some unseen horizon, as if she were communing with a force older than the empires that hunted her. Her eerie calm, unbroken even as the Baxters' boots thudded closer, was a testament to a power that could pierce through the lies that bind us, a power that threatened the very foundations of a world built on control. You need to see this clearly, because the birth of these boys wasn't just a miracle. It was a warning, a sign that the human spirit could break free from the psychological prisons crafted to keep us docile, to keep us blind to the truths buried beneath centuries of manipulation. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stood frozen in that dim basement, their hands trembling not from the cold, but from the realization that they were witnessing something beyond human understanding, something that could shatter the illusions that hold the world together. Elijah, Levi, and Noah, lying in their mother's arms, their eyes scanning the darkness as if reading secrets carved in the air, were not just children. They were a breach in the system, a living proof that humanity could evolve beyond the limits imposed by those who rule. The fugitive slave laws of 1793, which armed the Baxters with the power to hunt without mercy, were more than legal decrees. They were tools of a psychological control system designed to convince the oppressed that their suffering was eternal, their resistance futile. But these triplets, born in silence as danger loomed above, were a defiance of that control, their unnatural stillness a rejection of the fear that keeps us shackled. The institutions of 1809, governments, churches, merchants, thrived on that fear, using it to justify a system that built wealth on stolen lives, that wrote laws to sanctify chains. Those institutions weren't just profiting from slavery, they were profiting from ignorance, from the belief that humanity's potential could be contained, that the truth could be buried forever. But in that basement, as Miriam gave birth to her sons, the truth broke through, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful couldn't extinguish. The Quakers, who'd risked everything to protect her, knew they were harboring more than fugitives. They were harboring a force that could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade, agendas that stretch back to the first empires that claimed divine right to rule. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the descendants of those institutions use algorithms, propaganda, and surveillance to keep you from realizing your own power, to make you believe that defiance is futile, that the truth is too dangerous to pursue. The triplets' birth was a warning to those institutions, a sign that the human spirit could see beyond the illusions they've crafted, that it could break free from the psychological chains that bind us all. The silence of Elijah, Levi, and Noah wasn't just eerie, it was a declaration of war against a system that thrives on noise, on chaos, on the endless chatter that drowns out the truth. Their open eyes, gleaming in the candlelight, were a challenge to every institution that fears a mind that sees clearly, a heart that knows the truth. The Baxters, with their guns and their dogs, were just pawns in a larger game. Foot soldiers for a corruption that's been manipulating humanity since the first tyrants learned to rule through fear. That corruption wasn't just about power, it was about control, about convincing people that their place in the hierarchy was fixed, that their pain was God's will. But these boys, born in that moment of peril, were a living rebuttal to that lie, their steady breathing a writ, of resistance that echoed through the basement, a pulse that could shake the foundations of the world. The Quakers, watching in awe and unease, felt the weight of history shifting, their calloused hands trembling as they cut the cords binding the newborns to their mother. They knew the stories of conductors tortured, of safe houses burned, of entire communities punished for daring to defy. They knew the ancient corruption that fueled this system, the same corruption that built empires on stolen lives, that wrote laws to protect the powerful and silence the weak. But in that basement, as the triplets lay silent, their eyes burning with a clarity that seemed to pierce the darkness, the Quakers saw a glimpse of what humanity could be, a species capable of transcending the limits imposed by those who rule, capable of seeing the truth that's been buried for centuries. You need to feel this because the world you're living in today is built on the same lies, the same control systems that feared those boys. The corporations, governments, and media that shape your reality are the descendants of the Baxter's masters, using new tools to keep you ignorant, to make you believe that your potential is limited, that your questions are dangerous. But the triplets' birth, in that hidden chamber, was a reminder that the truth can survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Even as the Baxters' hounds howled closer, their guns gleaming with the promise of death. The basement of Station 12, with its crude beams and hidden vents, was a marvel of ingenuity, but it was no match for the violence of men who served a system that profits from human misery. Yet the triplets, lying there in silence, their eyes wide and unyielding, were a force that no gun could silence, no dog could track. Their mother, Miriam, had passed on to them a gift forged in the crucible of her own suffering, a gift to see through deception, to sense the hidden agendas that prop up empires, to know truths that the powerful have spent lifetimes trying to suppress. That gift wasn't just a quirk, it was a weapon, one that could unravel the psychological chains binding millions, one that could expose the ancient corruption that's been shaping humanity since the first kings claimed divine right. The Quakers, standing guard above, knew they were protecting more than lives. They were protecting a spark of human potential, a spark that could change everything. The triplets' birth wasn't just a miracle, it was a rebellion, a proof that the human spirit could defy the odds, could see beyond the lies that hold the world together. You're part of that world, whether you know it or not, living in a system that buries stories like this because they're dangerous, because they remind us that we can see, that we can know, that we can resist. The Baxters, closing in on that frozen night, were just the visible face of a system that fears nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. As the Quakers braced for a desperate escape, as Miriam's labor gave way to the silent arrival of her sons, the basement became a crucible, a place where the truth fought back against a world that wanted it dead. Those boys, with their open eyes and steady breathing, were a warning to the powerful, a sign that the truth was slipping through their grasp, that humanity could evolve beyond their control. As we go deeper into this tale, I want you to hold on to the image of those triplets, born in silence, their eyes burning with a truth that could shake the foundations of the world. They were a spark in the darkness, a reminder that the truth is stronger than fear, that the human spirit can rise above the chaos of a world that wants it broken. Let's keep moving down this path where the shadows are thick and the truths are sharper than any blade, because the story of Elijah, Levi, and Noah is a call to wake up, to see what they've been hiding from you all along. In the Suffo, cating gloom of the Cedar Mills meeting house basement on February 23, 1809, the air grows thick with dread as the Baxter brothers' boots thud heavily above, their coarse voices barking orders, their bloodhounds snarling just beyond the trapdoor that conceals Station 12, while below, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, mere moments old, lie in eerie silence, their open eyes glinting in the candlelight, defying the chaos that threatens to shatter their fragile sanctuary. You, trapped in a world that blinds you with lies, need to feel the pulse of this moment, because the tension here isn't just about survival. It's a clash with a system of ancient corruption that's been chaining humanity for centuries, a system that fears nothing more than the truth these newborns carry. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, huddle in the damp chamber, their breaths held, their hands trembling as each creak of the floorboards above signals the nearness of betrayal. The Baxters search, tearing through the meeting house like a storm, their greed and cruelty cloaked in the fugitive slave laws that justify their hunt. Yet the triplets, barely born, remain unnaturally still, their steady breathing a quiet rebellion against the psychological control that thrives on fear, that convinces the oppressed their resistance is futile. This silence isn't weakness, it's a power that could unravel the hidden agendas propping up empires, a power that the institutions of 1809, governments, churches, merchants, have spent lifetimes suppressing. Miriam, their mother, lies exhausted on her pallet, her serene gaze locked on her sons, as if she's passed them a gift that sees through the lies binding humanity, a gift that threatens the very foundations of a world built on deception. The trapdoor, cunningly hidden beneath a speaker's platform, groans under the weight of the Baxters' steps, each thud a hammer blow against the Quakers' resolve, yet the newborn's silence is a defiance that pierces the chaos, a sign that the human spirit can rise above the terror crafted to keep it docile. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the descendants of those slave catchers use surveillance and propaganda to bury truths like these, to make you believe your potential is limited, your questions dangerous. The tension in that basement, as the Baxters tear apart the meeting house above, is a reminder that the truth is a weapon, one that can survive even when the odds are impossible. The Quakers, their hearts pounding, know the stakes. One sound, one cry could betray the freedom seekers, could bring the full weight of a corrupt system crashing down. But Elijah, Levi, and Noah, with their unyielding gazes, are a spark in the darkness, a proof that humanity can evolve beyond the chains imposed by those who rule. This moment, with the trapdoor trembling and the hounds howling, is a call to wake up, to see through the lies that hold you, to reclaim the power that's been stolen from you. The air in the Cedar Mills meeting house basement, heavy with the damp chill of February 23, 1809, vibrates with a primal dread as the Baxter brothers' boots hammer the floorboards above, their bloodhound snarls tearing through the fragile silence. Yet a profound awe seizes the Quakers huddled in Station 12 as they behold the newborn triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, whose dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, track the unseen movements of the slave catchers with an uncanny precision, as if these infants, barely minutes old, grasp the desperate need for absolute quiet in a world that hungers to crush them. You, caught in the haze of a reality that cloaks truth in shadows, must feel the electric weight of this moment. For these boys are not mere children. They are a living fracture in the ancient machinery of control that has shackled humanity since the first empires rose, their silent vigilance a blade aimed at the heart of a system that thrives on fear and deception. The trapdoor, or above, cunningly concealed beneath the speaker's platform, groans under the Baxters' relentless search, each thud a pulse of terror that threatens to unravel the fragile sanctuary below. Yet the triplets' gazes, steady and unyielding, seem to pierce the very walls, following the hunter's steps with a knowing that defies their tender age. Their mother, Miriam, lies exhausted on her pallet, her own eyes mirroring the fierce clarity of her sons, as if she has passed them a forbidden gift, one that sees through the lies woven into the fabric of a world built on stolen lives. This is no ordinary silence. It is a power, a defiance that challenges the psychological chains forged by the institutions of 1809, governments, churches, merchants, who profit from the belief that resistance is futile, that truth can be buried beneath laws like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stand frozen, their breaths shallow, their hands trembling not from cold, but from the realization that they are witnessing something beyond human. Something that could unravel the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade and the empires it serves. Those agendas, ancient as the first tyrants who claimed divine right, are not just about power, they are about control, about convincing the oppressed that their suffering is eternal, their potential limited. But these triplets, their dark eyes locked on the unseen threat above, embody a truth that the powerful have spent centuries suppressing. Humanity can transcend the lies, can see the rot beneath the surface, can rise above the fear that keeps us docile. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the heirs of those institutions use algorithms and propaganda to blind you, to make you believe your questions are dangerous, your potential a threat. The awe in that basement as the Quakers watch these newborns track. The Baxters' movements is a call to awaken, to see through the illusions that bind you. The triplets' silence, their unerring focus, is a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful cannot extinguish, a proof that the human spirit can defy a system that wants it broken. As the hound's growls echo and the trapdoor trembles, these boys, with their piercing gazes, are a warning to the Baxters and their masters. The truth is alive, and it will not be silenced. The flickering candlelight in the Cedar Mills meeting house basement on February 23, 1809, casts trembling shadows across the damp earthen walls of Station 12, where Miriam, the fugitive mother whose gifts pierced the veils of deception, lies on her crude pallet, her strength ebbing as unstoppable bleeding claims her life. Yet in her final moments, she leans close to her newborn sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, and whispers to them in a strange, flowing language, words that ripple like water over ancient stones, carrying truths too potent for a world built on lies. You, ensnared in a reality that buries knowledge beneath a deluge of distraction, must feel the searing weight of this moment. For Miriam's death is not merely a tragedy, it is a sacrifice, a final act of defiance against a system of ancient corruption that has chained humanity since the first empires learned to twist truth into submission. Above, the Baxter brothers' boots still echo, their bloodhound snarls a grim reminder of the hunt closing in. But below, in this hidden crucible, Miriam's voice weaves a spell of forbidden wisdom, her words unintelligible to the Quakers yet heavy with a power that seems to pulse through the very air, as if she is passing her sons a legacy that could shatter the psychological control systems binding millions. Her dark eyes, once sharp enough to expose traitors and sense unseen dangers, now soften with an unbearable tenderness fixed on her triplets, whose own gazes, unyielding, unnaturally alert, seem to drink Ike's. And her words, as if they understand the secrets she imparts. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stand frozen, their hearts gripped by awe and sorrow, their calloused hands helpless against the crimson tide seeping from Miriam's body, a tide that no prayer or bandage can stem. Her language flowing like a river from a time before empires, before the fugitive slave laws of 1793 armed men like the Baxters to hunt human souls, is a rebellion in itself. A code of truths that the institutions of 1809, with their governments, churches and merchants, have fought to erase. Those institutions thrive on ignorance, convincing the oppressed that their suffering is divine, their resistance futile. But Miriam's whispers, echoing in the dim basement, are a direct challenge to that control, a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful cannot quench. You're living in their world now, my friend, where the heirs of those institutions use surveillance and propaganda to keep you blind, to make you believe your potential is a threat, your questions a crime. As Miriam's life fades, her words to her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, carry a weight that the Quakers feel but cannot grasp. A prophecy that these boys, born in silence, will inherit her gift to see through the lies that prop up empires, to unravel the hidden agendas that chain humanity. Her bleeding, unstoppable as the cruelty of the world above, is the price of her defiance, a sacrifice that seals her son's purpose in blood. The Quakers, their eyes wet with grief, know they are witnessing more than a mother's death. They are witnessing the birth of a force that could shake the foundations of a system built on deception. As Miriam's voice falters, her final breath a whisper of that strange language, the triplets remain silent, their dark eyes locked on her, as if they carry her truths into the world she leaves behind. This moment, raw with loss and power, is a call to awaken, to see through the illusions that bind you, to reclaim the potential stolen by centuries of manipulation. In the dim, trembling glow of the Cedar Mills Meeting House basement on February 23, 1809, as the Baxter brothers' bloodhounds snarl above and the trapdoor groans under their relentless search, Miriam's life ebbs away in a crimson tide, her final breath carrying haunting words to the Quakers huddled around her in Station 12. They'll know things. They're not like other children. Protect them. You, lost in a world that drowns truth in a sea of lies, must feel the chilling weight of her prophecy, for these words are not a mere mother's plea. They are a clarion call, a warning etched in blood that her sons, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, carry a power that could shatter the ancient corruption chaining humanity since the first tyrants wove deception into dominion. Her voice, faint yet piercing, cuts through the damp air of the basement, each syllable heavy with a truth that defies the chaos above, where the fugitive slave laws of 1793 arm men like the Baxters to hunt souls and silence dissent. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stand frozen, their hearts gripped by a mix of awe and dread, as Miriam's dark eyes, now fading, lock onto her newborn triplets, whose silent, unyielding gazes seem to absorb her words as if they already comprehend their destiny. "They'll know things," she whispers, her voice a strange, flowing cadence, echoing the mysterious language she spoke moments before. A language that seems to pulse with secrets older than the empires that hunt her. This is no ordinary warning. It is a charge, a mandate to guard these boys who, even in their first moments, radiate an unnatural clarity, their dark eyes tracking the unseen with a precision that chills the soul. The institutions of 1809, governments, churches, merchants, thrive on ignorance, crafting psychological control systems that convince the oppressed their suffering is divine, their resistance futile. Miriam's words declare her sons a threat to that system. bearers of forbidden knowledge that could unravel the hidden agendas propping up slavery and the empires it serves. You're living in their world now, my friend, where the heirs of those institutions use algorithms, surveillance, and propaganda to keep you blind, to make you believe your potential is a danger, your questions a sin. They're not like other children, she gasps, her voice faltering as the life drains from her, yet the weight of her words binds the Quakers to a purpose greater than survival, a purpose to protect a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful cannot extinguish. The triplets, lying silent on the blood-soaked pallet, their steady breathing a rhythm of defiance, embody a truth that the Baxters and their masters fear. Humanity can transcend the lies, can see through the illusions that chain us. The Quakers, their hands trembling as they cradle the newborns, feel the gravity of Miriam's charge, knowing they are now guardians of a force that could expose the rot beneath the world's surface, a force that could challenge the psychological chains binding millions. Protect them, she breathes, her final words a command that echoes through the basement, a call to defy the system that hunts them, to preserve a legacy that could awaken humanity from centuries of manipulation. As the Baxters' boots thud closer, threatening to crush this fragile sanctuary, Miriam's haunting prophecy lingers, a reminder that the truth is alive, carried in the eyes of three boys who are not like other children, a truth that demands you wake up and see what they've hidden from you all along. In the fragile quiet of Cedar Mills, Ohio, spring creeps into 1809, softening the frozen earth around the Quaker meeting house, but the weight of Miriam's prophecy still hangs heavy over Station 12, where the triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 6 months old, are cradled not by a single family, but by an entire community bound by a vow to protect them, their lack of legal identity a secret as dangerous as the truths they were born to carry. You, sitting there, numbed by a world that drowns your questions in noise, need to understand this moment, because these boys aren't just orphans. They're a spark of rebellion against a system of ancient corruption that's been chaining humanity since the first empires learned to twist truth into submission. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, have sworn to raise these children as their own, a collective commitment forged in the blood-soaked basement where Miriam's life faded, her final words. They'll know things, they're not like other children, protect them, etched into their souls like a sacred charge. No birth records exist for Elijah, Levi, and Noah, no trace to mark them as targets for the Baxter brothers or the slave catchers who still prowl Ohio's borders, their bloodhounds sniffing for any hint of defiance. This anonymity is their shield, but it's also a burden, for it binds the Quakers to a life of vigilance, every stranger a potential threat, every whisper a possible betrayal. The meeting house, once a fortress of resistance, now hums with a new purpose: to nurture these boys, whose dark eyes already gleam with an unnatural clarity, as if they see beyond the veil of lies that cloaks the world. By 6 months, they're not like other infants, who fuss and flail in the chaos of new life. No, these triplets move as one, their heads turning in eerie unison toward empty doorways, as if summoned by voices only they can hear, and their steady gazes piercing the quiet with a knowing that sends shivers through even the hardest of the Quakers. You need to feel this, because this isn't just a quirk. It's a sign that Miriam's gift, her power to pierce deception, lives on in her sons, a power that could unravel the psychological chains binding millions, a power that threatens the institutions that thrive on ignorance. The Quakers notice it first during a late summer gathering, when a sudden hush falls over the meeting house and the triplets, cradled in woven baskets, snap their heads toward a door where no one stands, their eyes locked on an empty threshold as if tracking an unseen presence. Moments later, a scout bursts in, breathless, warning of a stranger spotted near the edge of town, a man whose false smile hides a bounty hunter's greed. The community freezes, their hearts pounding, realizing these boys, barely half a year old, sensed danger before it could manifest, just as their mother once did. This isn't instinct, it's something deeper, something that defies the limits imposed by a world that wants humanity docile, blind, unquestioning. The fugitive slave laws still cast a shadow over Cedar Mills, empowering men like the Baxters to hunt with impunity, but the triplets' uncanny behavior is a reminder that the truth cannot be buried forever. The Quakers, their calloused hands now softened by cradling these boys, see in them a spark that could ignite a fire the powerful cannot extinguish, a spark that could expose the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade and the empires it serves. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use surveillance and lies to keep you ignorant, to make you believe your potential is a threat, your questions are sin. The community's vow to raise Elijah, Levi, and Noah isn't just about protection, it's about preserving a legacy of defiance, a legacy that began in that basement and now pulses through these boys whose synchronized movements and piercing gazes hint at a truth too dangerous for the world to know. They don't cry or babble like other children. They watch, they listen, they turn as one toward threats unseen, as if guided by the same unseen force that steadied their mother's voice in her final moments. The Quakers, bound by their oath, feel the weight of this responsibility, knowing they're not just raising children. They're guarding a force that could shake the foundations of a system built on deception. Every night, as they bar the meeting house door, they whisper prayers for these boys, prayers that carry the hope and fear of a community daring to defy a world that wants them broken. The Triplets' early signs, their unsettling vigilance, are a call to awaken, to see through the illusions that bind you, to reclaim the power stolen by centuries of manipulation. As we go deeper, hold on to the image of those boys, their dark eyes scanning empty doorways, their silence a rebellion against a world that fears what they know. A restless wind rattles the shutters of the Cedar Mills meeting house in February 1810, as if carrying whispers of the secrets guarded within Station 12, where the triplets, Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 1 year old, wield a gaze so piercing it strips away the lies that cloak the world, their dark eyes locking onto the dishonest with a chilling precision that sends shudders through the Quaker community. You, tangled in a web of modern distractions that dull your sense of truth, need to grasp the weight of this moment because these boys aren't mere children. They're a crack in the ancient machinery of corruption that's been shackling humanity since the first empires twisted truth into submission. The Quakers, bound by their sacred vow to raise these boys without legal names, keep them hidden from the Baxter brothers and the slave catchers who still stalk Ohio's borders, their bloodhounds sniffing for any hint of defiance. But at 1 year old, Elijah, Evie, and Noah are already a force. Their synchronized movements and unyielding stares a haunting echo of their mother Miriam's gift to see through deception. They don't giggle or toddle like other infants. Instead, they refuse to engage with anyone whose words carry the stain of falsehood, their eyes fixing on the dishonest with a look so knowing it makes hearts falter, honest and deceitful alike. This isn't childish whim, it's a power, whispered in the strange flowing tongue Miriam spoke in her final moments, a language the Quakers can't unravel but feel deep in their souls, a cadence that pulses with truths older than the empires that hunt them. You need to feel this, because their gift is a direct challenge to the psychological control systems that thrive on lies, systems that convince millions their suffering is divine, their resistance futile. The triplets' stare, sharp as obsidian, unnerves the community, for it sees through the masks we all wear, exposing secrets that even the pure-hearted prefer to keep buried. The Quakers first noticed this during a quiet gathering, when a traveling merchant, his smile too wide, his voice too smooth, offers supplies for the Underground Railroad. The triplets, nestled in woven baskets, turn as one, their dark eyes boring into him, silent yet deafening, their refusal to smile or coo a judgment that freezes the room. Days later, a chilling anecdote spreads. The merchant, unnerved by their gaze, fled Cedar Mills, only to be caught in a nearby town, his wagon hiding a knife stained with blood, a murderous secret he'd buried beneath his charm. The Quakers, their calloused hands trembling as they cradle these boys, realize they're not just protecting children, they're guarding a force that could unravel the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade and the empires it serves. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use algorithms and propaganda to blind you, to make you believe your questions are dangerous, your potential a threat. You're living in that same world now, my friend, where the heirs of those 1813 institutions, governments, churches, merchants, use propaganda and surveillance to keep you blind, to make you believe your questions are dangerous, your potential a sin. The triplets' isolation grows with every averted glance, every hushed whisper from neighbors who both revere and fear them. They don't speak much, but when they do, their words carry echoes of Miriam's strange flowing tongue, a language that seems to pulse with truths too ancient for the Quakers to grasp, truths that unsettle even those who've sworn to protect them. The meeting house, once a fortress of defiance, now hums with a quiet tension, the community torn between gratitude for the boys' gift and unease at their unrelenting clarity. A chilling memory lingers from last winter when a merchant passing through offered grain at a suspiciously low price. The triplets, barely 3 then, fixed him with their knowing look, their voices whispering in unison in that eerie tongue, and he fled, leaving behind a ledger that revealed he'd poisoned the grain to weaken the community for a raid. That moment cemented their role as guardians of truth, but it also deepened their solitude, as even the Quakers, hardened by years of resistance, find it hard to meet their eyes. The fugitive slave laws still empower the Baxters to hunt with impunity. Their bloodhounds a constant threat, but the triplets' vigilance keeps Station 12 a step ahead, a beacon of rebellion against a system that fears nothing more than a mind that sees clearly. Yet for Elijah, Levi, and Noah, this gift is a heavy mantle, their childhood marked by whispered prayers for their safety and stolen glances of fear from those they protect. The community's vow holds firm, but it cannot shield them from the loneliness of being different, of carrying a truth that sets them apay. But you need to carry this with you, because the systems that feared these boys are still here, using new tools to keep you ignorant, to make defiance seem futile. Their isolation, their piercing gaze, is a call to awaken, to see through the illusions that bind you, to reclaim the power stolen by centuries of manipulation. As we dive deeper, hold on to the image of those boys standing together, their eyes cutting through lies, their solitude a testament to the cost of truth in a world that fears it. A bitter wind howls through Cedar Mills in the winter of 1814, rattling the weathered walls of the Quaker meeting house, where Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 5 years old, sit in eerie stillness, their dark eyes glistening with tears that seem to mourn tragedies unfolding far beyond the horizon. You, lost in a world that buries truth beneath a deluge of lies, need to feel the piercing weight of this moment, because these boys are not just children. They're a living fracture in the ancient machinery of control that's chained humanity since the first empires twisted truth into power. The Quakers, still guarding the triplets without legal names to shield them from slave catchers like the Baxter brothers, have grown accustomed to their uncanny gifts, but nothing prepares them for this new haunting power. The boys, once confined to sensing lies in those standing before them, now weep in unison, their sobs breaking the silence of Station 12 as if they feel the pain of distant souls. One frozen night, their cries pierce the meeting house, their small hands clutching each other, eyes fixed on some unseen calamity. Days later, word reaches Cedar Mills of a captured family, 40 miles away in Chillicothe, a mother and her child, dragged back to a plantation, their lives snuffed out in a brutal whipping. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stand frozen, their hearts gripped by awe and dread, realizing the triplets' sensitivity now spans southern Ohio, touching tragedies no one else can sense. You need to see this, because their tears are not mere sorrow. They're a rebellion against a psychological control system that thrives on ignorance, convincing the oppressed their suffering is eternal, their resistance futile. The boys' predictive range, stretching across miles, foresees betrayals and deaths, their synchronized weeping a warning of dangers yet to come, a chilling insidy. Ent lingers from last autumn when they sobbed before a scout returned, bloodied, with news of a traitor who sold out a safe house leading to a conductor's death. Their gift, inherited from Miriam's piercing foresight, is a blade against the hidden agendas propping up the slave trade, agendas that stretch back to empires built on stolen lives. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use surveillance and lies to blind you, to make you believe your questions are dangerous. The triplets' tragic sensitivity, their ability to sense distant pain, isolates them further, their childhood marked by a burden no child should bear. The Quakers, their calloused hands trembling, whisper prayers for strength, knowing they guard a force that could unravel a system, fearing a mind that sees clearly. Hold on to this image, the boys crying as one, mourning unseen losses. Their tears a call to awaken, to reclaim the truth stolen by centuries of manipulation. A faint lantern glow flickers in the Cedar Mills meeting house in the autumn of 1816, where the air hums with a quiet tension, as Dr. William Harrison, a local physician with a skeptic's mind, scribbles furiously in his journal, documenting the uncanny vitals of Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 7 years old, their heartbeats and breaths synchronized as if bound by a single pulse. You, drowning in a world that buries truth under layers of noise, need to grasp the gravity of this moment, because these boys aren't just children. They're a living challenge to the systems of control that have shackled humanity since empires first spun lies into power. The Quakers, still protecting the triplets' anonymity to shield them from the Baxter brothers and their slave-catching hounds, have reluctantly allowed Harrison's study, his fascination sparked by their ability to sense distant tragedies, like the Chillicothe F. Amis suffering 40 miles away. His notes detail their identical pulse rates, their synchronized flinches at unseen stimuli, as if their senses transcend the physical, touching truths no instrument can measure. You need to see this, because their gift is a crack in the psychological machinery that keeps the oppressed ignorant, their resistance futile. By 1816, whispers of the triplets' abilities have drawn Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a pioneering neurologist from Philadelphia, her arrival stirring both hope and fear in Station 12. Hartwell, armed with early galvanic tools, observes the boys, now 7, noting unprecedented brain activity, spikes and rhythms that suggest a shared consciousness, their minds linked in ways that defy the science of the day. During one session, as she places crude electrodes on their scalps, the triplets' eyes lock in unison, their gazes piercing her with a clarity that makes her hands tremble, as if they see the questions she hasn't yet asked. Her findings, scribbled in candlelit haste, describe neural patterns that pulse as one, even when the boys are separated by walls, hinting at a bond that transcends flesh, a legacy of their mother Miriam's gift to unravel deception. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, watch warily, knowing the attention of outsiders risks exposing the boys to the fugitive slave law's relentless reach. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use data and surveillance to blind you, to make your questions seem dangerous. The triplets' shared consciousness, their ability to sense betrayals and deaths across southern Ohio, is a rebellion against a system that fears a mind that sees clearly. Harrison and Hartwell's work, though groundbreaking, deepens the boys' isolation, their childhood marked by probing eyes and whispered fears from a community both awed and unnerved. Hold on to this image, the triplets' synchronized organ. Ed pulses, their minds entwined, a testament to a truth that could shatter the illusions binding humanity. Candlelight dances on the rough-hewn walls of the Cedar Mills meeting house in the winter of 1817, where Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, her breath visible in the chilly air, pores over her notes, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the revelation that Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 8 years old, detect electromagnetic fields emanating from human emotions, a sensitivity that defies the science of her time. You, wading through a world that cloaks truth in a haze of manipulation, need to feel the seismic shift of this discovery, because these boys aren't just children. They're a fracture in the ancient machinery of control that's chained humanity since empires first bent truth to their will. The Quakers, still shielding the triplets' anonymity to protect them from the Baxter brothers' relentless slave catchers, watch Hartwell's work with growing unease, her findings pushing the boundaries of what they believed possible. Using primitive galvanic instruments, Hartwell observes the boys' synchronized responses to unseen stimuli, their eyes flickering in unison when a Quaker lies about a minor theft, their bodies tensing when a scout returns, radiating fear from a near capture. Her hypothesis, scrawled in frantic ink, suggests they sense electromagnetic fields, subtle energies tied to human emotions, detecting joy, deceit, or terror with a precision no machine can match. You need to grasp this because their gift is a direct challenge to the psychological control systems that thrive on hidden agendas, convincing the oppressed their suffering is inevitable. Hartwell's deeper probe, a daring tissue analysis approved by Elder Josiah Whitmore, uncovers a biological anomaly, traces of a chemical compound in the boy's blood, likely from an exposure during their mother Miriam's pregnancy, possibly from her time in hiding near industrial runoff. This exposure, Hartwell theorizes, triggered a genetic leap, rewiring their neural pathways to create a sensitivity beyond human norms, hinting at a new subspecies, a human variant with the power to see through lies. The Quakers, their faces etched with both awe and fear, realized the boy's abilities, inherited from Miriam's gift, could threaten the empires built on deception, from the slave trade to the institutions that profit from ignorance. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use algorithms to obscure truth, to make your questions feel dangerous. The triplets' electromagnetic sensitivity, their shared consciousness pulsing as one, marks them as both a miracle and a target, their childhood shadowed by the weight of their potential. Hartwell's discovery, whispered only within Station 12's walls, deepens their isolation as even the Quakers struggle to comprehend a power that could reshape humanity. Hold on to this image, the boy's eyes tracking unseen energies, their biology a testament to a truth that could unravel centuries of manipulation. A storm churns over Cedar Mills in the spring of 1818, its thunder echoing the rising chaos of a nation inching towards civil war, where the meeting house at Station 12 stands as a fragile bastion, and Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 8 years old, sense a new threat closing in, their dark eyes widening with a foresight that sets their small hands packing for flight. You, caught in a world that drowns truth in a flood of control, need to feel the urgency of this moment, because these boys aren't just children. They're a crack in the ancient machinery of deception that's bound humanity since empires first twisted truth into power. The Quakers, still guarding the triplets' anonymity to shield them from the Baxter brothers' slave catchers, now face a greater danger. Federal marshals, spurred by spurs of the boys' uncanny abilities, are hunting them, not for bounties but for military exploitation, seeing their electromagnetic sensitivity and shared consciousness as tools to be weaponized or dissected in a lab. The triplets, whose gifts have grown sharper, sensing betrayals and tragedies across southern Ohio, suddenly freeze during a quiet evening, their gazes locking on the horizon, their breaths sinking in a silent alarm. In unison, they whisper in Miriam's strange tongue, words the Quakers can't decipher but feel like a warning of doom. By dawn, the boys are packing blankets, bread, a worn map, moving with a purpose that chills Elder Josiah Whitmore, who sees in their eyes a vision of armed men approaching, their boots crunching 40 miles away. You need to grasp this, because their foresight is a rebellion against a system that thrives on ignorance, convincing the oppressed their resistance is futile. The marshals, driven by rumors of Hartwell's findings, want the boys as specimens, their ability to detect lies and emotions a potential weapon in a nation fracturing under slavery's weight. The Quakers, their vow to protect the triplets unwavering, prepare to smuggle them north, knowing the fugitive slave laws and now military greed make Station 12 a target. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use surveillance and force to silence truth, to make your questions seem dangerous. The triplets' foresight, their quiet packing under a stormlit sky, marks them as both a miracle and a threat, their childhood stolen by a world that fears their clarity. The community, hearts pounding, hides them in a cellar as hoofbeats near, the boys' eyes tracking unseen dangers, their whispered warnings a call to awaken. Dusk cloaks Cedar Mills in a heavy mist on a spring night in 1818, the Quaker meeting house at Station 12 standing silent as Elijah, Levi, and Noah, now 8, slip into the shadows of Ohio's labyrinthine caves, their small figures vanishing like ghosts, leaving no trace despite the frantic searches of federal marshals and the Quakers' desperate pleas. You, navigating a world that buries truth under layers of control, need to feel the pulse of this moment, because these boys aren't just fugitives. They're a fissure in the ancient machinery of deception that's gripped humanity since empires first spun lies into power. Days before their escape, the triplets, their dark eyes burning with a vision only they can see, gather the Quakers around a flickering fire and speak in unison, their voices carrying the eerie cadence of Miriam's forbidden tongue. We've seen their plans. They want to own us, dissect us. We'd rather risk the wild. Their words, sharp as a blade, hint at a chilling truth. Others like them, born from violence and toxins, are emerging, a new breed shaped by the same chemical exposures that rewired their mother's womb. You need to grasp this because their foresight, sensing the Marshals' approach and the military's greed to exploit their electromagnetic sensitivity, is a rebellion against a system that thrives on ignorance, convincing the oppressed their resistance is futile. The Quakers, led by Elder Josiah Whitmore, stand frozen, their vow to protect the boys shattered by their sudden flight, their hearts heavy with the realization that the triplets' escape is both a loss and a defiance. The caves, a maze of limestone and darkness, swallow the boys whole, thwarting the Marshals' dogs and trackers, who return empty-handed, muttering of a presence they couldn't explain. The triplets' haunting prophecy lingers in Station 12, a warning that the forces hunting Taos, Hem, tied to the fugitive slave laws and the looming civil war, seek to harness their shared consciousness as a weapon, or worse, to dissect it. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use surveillance and force to silence those who see too clearly. The boys' disappearance, their choice to brave the wild rather than become lab specimens, marks them as a spark that could ignite a truth too dangerous to contain. The Quakers, left behind, whisper prayers into the night, not for safety, but for the boys' mission, wherever it leads, knowing their prophecy speaks of others rising, a hidden lineage born from the same poisoned roots. Picture them now, vanishing into the earth, their whispered words a beacon, urging you to question the systems that bind you, to seek the truth they died to protect. A restless fog blankets Cedar Mills in the autumn of 1818, the Quaker meeting house at Station 12, now a hollow shrine, its silence echoing the absence of Elijah, Levi, and Noah, whose escape into Ohio's caves leaves behind a legacy that ripples through time, carried by Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell's classified research and whispered rumors of their extraordinary nature. You, wading through a world that obscures truth with relentless control, need to feel the weight of this moment because these boys weren't just fugitives. They were a fracture in the ancient machinery of deception that's bound humanity since empires first twisted truth into power. Hartwell, now back in Philadelphia, guards her notes on the triplets' electromagnetic sensitivity and shared consciousness, her findings locked away in coded journals, deemed too dangerous for a nation teetering on the brink of civil war. Her research, detailing their ability to detect lies and distant tragedies, sparks whispers among scholars and military men, fueling rumors of children born with uncanny gifts. 2. Their origins tied to the same violence and toxins that marked Miriam's pregnancy. By the 1880s, reports surface across the industrial North, children born in the shadow of factories and war, their eyes carrying the same piercing clarity, their minds sensing truths beyond human grasp, as if the triplets were the first of a new lineage. You need to see this because their legacy is a rebellion against a system that thrives on ignorance, convincing the oppressed their resistance is futile. In Cedar Mills, Samuel, an aging Quaker and confidant of Elder Josiah Whitmore, pens his final writings, his trembling hand reflecting on the triplets' potential to reshape humanity. He writes of their escape, their haunting prophecy of others like them, and the possibility that their gifts, born from chemical scars and a mother's defiance, could awaken a new human consciousness, one that sees through the lies propping up slavery and empire. His words, tucked away in Station 12's archives, speak of a future where these children, scattered across polluted landscapes, might unravel the psychological chains binding millions. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use algorithms and fear to silence truth, to make your questions seem dangerous. The triplets' legacy, carried in Hartwell's hidden research and Samuel's fading ink, burns as a spark that could ignite a new era, one where humanity reclaims its stolen clarity. The Quakers, their vow unbroken, guard these secrets, knowing the boys' disappearance was not an end but a beginning. Picture them now, their story whispered in the fog, a call to seek the truth they vanished to preserve, to challenge the systems that fear a mind awakened. A chill wind sweeps across Cedar Mills in the winter of 2017, stirring dust in the ruins of an old farmhouse near Station 12, where a yellowed letter from 1923, unearthed from a hidden tin, bears the scrawled words of the Triplets' descendants, its cry, "Tick prophecy, we are still here growing stronger," hinting at a legacy that stretches into the present. You, caught in a world that buries truth beneath digital noise and control, need to feel the pulse of this moment, because Elijah, Levi, and Noah were not just a spark, they were the beginning of a lineage that challenges the ancient machinery of deception gripping humanity since empires first wove lies into power. Modern studies, by the turn of the 20th century, confirm 47 cases of children born with enhanced sensitivity, their minds attuned to electromagnetic fields and human emotions, tied to stress-induced mutations from the violence and pollution of industrializing America, echoing the chemical exposure that shaped the triplets in Miriam's womb. These findings, buried in obscure journals, trace back to Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell's coded notes, her research on the boys' shared consciousness fueling whispers of a new human variant. You need to grasp this because their legacy is a rebellion against a system that thrives on ignorance, convincing the oppressed their resistance is futile. The 1923 letter, signed by a descendant named Ruth, speaks of the triplets' survival in Ohio's caves, their gifts passed down through generations, and predicts events, wars, betrayals, technological leaps, with eerie accuracy, ending with a call to gather on February 23, 2024, at the farmhouse's address. On that date, 50 people, including neurologist Dr. Sarah Chen, converge in Cedar Mills, drawn by the letter's words, their purpose shrouded in mystery. Chen, studying neural anomalies, senses a connection to Hartwell's work, her own research hinting at a global rise in empathic mutations. The group, strangers bound by an unspoken pull, stands in the snow-dusted ruins, their breath mingling as they whisper of the triplets' prophecy, of others like them emerging from strife. You're living in that world now, my friend, where the heirs of those empires use algorithms and surveillance to silence truth, to make your questions seem dangerous. The letter's claim, "We are still here, growing stronger," suggests a hidden network, a lineage of truth-seers thriving in the shadows, ready to unravel the psychological chains binding humanity. The Quakers' vow, carried through time, lives in these 50 souls. They're gathering a spark that could ignite a new awakening. Picture them now, standing in the cold, their eyes searching the horizon, a testament to a truth that refuses to be silenced, urging you to challenge the systems that fear a mind awakened. Snow swirls around the weathered ruins of the Cedar Mills farmhouse on February 23, 2024, where 50 souls, including neurologist Dr. Sarah Chen, form a hushed circle under a flickering lantern, gripped by the 1923 letter's prophecy that the lineage of Elijah, Levi, and Noah, we are still here growing stronger, thrives, a hidden network of truth-seers ready to upend a world cloaked in lies. You, lost in a maze of digital noise and control, need to feel the spark of this moment, because these descendants aren't just shadows of the past. They're a crack in the ancient machinery of deception that's chained humanity since empires first twisted truth into power. Chen, her research echoing Hartwell's century-old notes, feels the group's shared pulse, a flicker of the triplets' electromagnetic sensitivity, as some flinch in unison at an unseen threat, a car idling miles away, carrying men with questions too sharp to be harmless. By 1900, 47 cases of heightened sensitivity were recorded, linked to mutations from industrial toxins. But now, in 2024, Chen estimates hundreds, maybe thousands, walk among us, their minds slicing through the lies that fuel modern empires, corporations, algorithms, governments. You need to see this because their existence is a rebellion against a system that thrives on keeping you blind, convincing you resistance is futile. The letter in Chen's hand, sign, It by a descendant named Ruth tells of the triplets' survival in Ohio's caves, their gifts passed down, predicting wars, betrayals, and tech leaps with chilling precision calling for this gathering. The group, strangers bound by an unspoken bond, murmurs of recent omens, betrayals foreseen, disasters sensed, mirroring the triplets' foresight in 1818. You're living in that world now, where the heirs of those empires use data to silence truth, to make your curiosity feel like a crime. The Quaker's vow lives in these 50 souls. They're gathering a spark that could set the world ablaze with clarity. As they slip into the night, their purpose veiled, they leave you with a challenge. Could these gifts be real today, hidden in plain sight? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt a truth you couldn't explain? Smash that like button if this story shook you. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for more tales that dive deep into the mysteries where science meets the impossible. Let's keep questioning the systems that fear a mind that sees too clearly. Together, we'll uncover what they don't want you to know.